morning, it's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 3rd of June. Today,
travelling by train, think again, because train services are to be crippled yet again today as another strike hits the rail network. Tens of thousands of Mancunians will be travelling south to the FA Cup final today, but fortunately with Manchester United, many of their fans, of course, will already be there.
a second complaint has now been brought against Swansea MP Geraint Davies as he remains suspended from the Labour Party pending an investigation into sexual misconduct. Does Westminster have a sex pest problem?
And do you know what to put in your recycling bins? The government is set to launch a drive to stop people putting the wrong types of items in their recycling. Items like plastic bags and toothpaste tubes cannot be processed in recycling centres.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
It's been a dry week of weather across the UK through this week, but is the fine and sunny weather going to continue across the country through this weekend? Find out all the details with me here on GB News.
Top of the morning, I'm Martin Daubney.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. To our top story now, and the FA Cup final goes ahead today as 90,000 fans will be heading to Wembley Stadium.
But this weekend's rail strikes will have a major effect on Manchester United and City supporters travelling down from the north of England.
Yes, we're joined now by our reporter Sophie Reaper, who's in Manchester for us this morning. Good morning to you, Sophie. And this has caused a lot of disruption for travelling fans, hasn't it?
It has indeed. Very good morning to you both. We're in Manchester City Centre this morning. It's a little bit early yet. The coaches are going to start departing around 6:30, but some fans are here bright and early. You mentioned there the disruption. ASLEV and the RMT are striking today, which means there are no trains whatsoever between Manchester and London. We're expecting over 60,000 fans from Manchester United and Manchester City to attend Wembley later. That's over two-thirds of Wembley's 90,000 capacity. So the fact that there's going to be no trains is really causing massive disruption. So the alternative route that lots of fans will be taking is the coach. And one of those fans who's be taking the coach this morning is joining me now. Good morning to you, Anne. Anne is a lifelong City fan. She'll be going down to Wembley today. How excited are you?
Very excited. You've been waiting for this moment, and because it's historic and we're playing United in a final, that couldn't be any better. And hopefully it's the treble year, so I am following them to Istanbul next week as well.
She mentions the treble there, just to explain for any of our viewers who doesn't know what that means. Manchester City have just won the Premier League. They're going today to try and win the FA Cup, and next weekend they'll be competing in the Champions League. So that would mean if they win all three, they'll do what's called the treble, which is incredibly rare and special for fans. You'll be taking the coach today.
Yes.
How frustrating is it that these strikes are disrupting it for you?
Well, very frustrating. I mean, we were up at 4 o'clock. It's a 5-hour journey, but I'm very grateful to the FA because they put on these extra coaches. So we would have had to make our own individual plans and drive there maybe. So I'm really grateful for the coaches, actually, but it's a 5-hour journey.
It is quite the trip. I know I made it earlier this year. So there's 60 coaches been put on by the FA for Man City fans, 60 coaches been put on for Man United fans. Let me ask you, it's the first time you've ever played them in the FA Cup final. What result are you expecting, but what are you hoping for as well?
It's definitely a City win, but by how much, that I can't predict. So I'm a bit superstitious, so I'll leave it to the gods.
I won't push you on it then. Just a final word. If you are to win, and you are to win next weekend, what would it mean to you to do that historic treble?
It's just historic. It's a lifetime waiting for it to come, as all City fans know. So it will be very special indeed, yeah.
Thank you so much, Anne. I will wish you luck as well. Of course, it is a huge deal to football fans to reach these finals. It is not once in a lifetime. It depends who you're supporting, but it is an incredibly special thing that people really do, throw themselves into. It's something that people are incredibly passionate about, and the fact that these strikes have been scheduled for today will be frustrating thousands, tens of thousands of Man City and Man United fans all over the country.
OK, Sophie Reaper, thank you for that update from Manchester. I'll tell you what, Ellie.
Tell me.
As far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't even take the chance on transport today. I just said to you, and I wasn't even joking, if Forest were in the cup final, very unlikely event.
Yes, that's true.
I'd rather come to London the night before and sleep rough.
OK.
I would.
I found that quite an extreme response.
But, but if you couldn't get a hotel, because it's going to be quite chocker because of the trains, a lot of people will have the same idea. To me, I would not even take the chance, because, if you can't get down here and you got a ticket, you're never, ever going to forgive yourself.
No, I suppose that's true. And I suppose if you are a lifelong fan, and if Nottingham Forest were to be in the FA Cup final, it would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Well, it was 1991, I think, was the last time. And so it more or less, for me, has been a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
More or less.
If it was today, I'd be sleeping rough. I think I would.
Oh, OK. Well, you're very dedicated, Martin. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. If you are a City fan or a United fan coming down to London today, do let us know. Perhaps you're watching us on the phone or even listening to us on the radio in the car. Who knows? Do let us know how it's going, how are you feeling. What time's kick-off? 3 p.m?
It's 3 o'clock. It's a traditional time. It's always been put back late, but this year, because I think the police don't want people to get too much on the old laughing juice, they've brought it back to the historical 3 o'clock kick-off. So in that respect, it is a classic FA Cup Saturday.
Yeah, and in that respect, they've also got time. If you're leaving now, it's looking good for you.
Yeah.
Do get in touch with us this morning on that story or any of the other stories that we're going to be talking about this morning. This one caught my eye on the Daily Star. The Daily Star often does catch my eye because it's something always very, very different. This is a bit bonkers. The headline is, who the hell are these sickos? It's 13% of the British public pour tea or coffee on their cornflakes.
Who? What?
Yes,
why?
It's bonkers. Why? I couldn't tell you, but it says Britain is becoming a nation of deviants. 13%, which is a lot.
I've never, ever in all my time heard of any such witchcraft as that.
On their cornflakes. Yeah, no, so not for you?
No, I've never even heard of it.
But it got me thinking, strange food combinations or strange flavour combinations that work for you. Let us know. Jaffa cakes in tea, is that a bit weird?
Yeah, that's right. I did have a friend one time I lived with who put water on his cornflakes.
That's weird.
But that's because he was tight and everyone stole his milk. And so he put water on cornflakes to make a point about people stealing his milk. He said he hated it. That's
got to be the blandest breakfast. Yeah. Watery cornflakes. Yeah, not for me. But do get in touch if you have tea or coffee on your cornflakes. We want to meet the 13% of you who do that. That's bonkers. And also, strange flavour combinations. What works for you? Let us know. gbnews@gbnews.com.
OK, and let's bring you up to date now with what else is going on today.
And at least 288 people have been killed and 850 have been injured after two passenger trains collided in India, making it the country's deadliest rail accident in more than a decade. The Coromandel Express, which runs from Kolkata to Chennai, crashed into a superfast express in the eastern state of Odisha. The army has been deployed to help with the evacuation and the injured.
And diesel prices fell by a record of almost 12 pence last month, the biggest drop in 1 month for over 2 decades. The RAC says the average price of diesel dropped from £1.58.9p to 147p in May, 7th consecutive month in which UK pump prices reduced. Finally, this means the cost of filling up a typical family car has fallen by £6.50.
Animal rights activists are threatening to cancel or severely delay today's Epsom Derby. Animal Rising says the group will put their bodies on the line to shut down the race and protect the animals. Surrey police warn they will not tolerate any risks to public safety. And I do worry about that line, that put your bodies on the line. I mean, we heard it yesterday. We were speaking to an animal rights activist yesterday from Animal Rising, and she said exactly that line, didn't she?
Yeah, and
it makes me nervous.
It does me too, and I think it's not good for the welfare of the horses as well, let alone the people. But I do think, Ali, as we heard directly when Animal Rising came in here yesterday, I think they are starting to view themselves as kind of modern-day suffragettes, who, of course, threw themselves historically in front of horses to make that specific point. Their lives were a price worth paying. Now, the jockey club has said they have a designated area for protest. I suspect that will be violated. We could have a bit of chaos today. I really, really hope no one gets hurt. And, of course, the horses don't go. If this is about horse safety, why invade a track and risk that?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? It's if you are using your bodies, it would suggest that you're going to use your bodies to disrupt the track, and those will be racing horses. So it does just make me nervous. Let us know what you think of that at home. You'll definitely have a view. gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK, moving on. A second complaint has been levelled against Swansea MP for the Labour Party, Geraint Davies, as he remains suspended from the party, pending an investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct.
Westminster is no newcomer when it comes to a sex problem, with new MPs often warned to stay away from dozens of dodgy colleagues.
Well, to discuss that now, we're joined by former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Morning to you, Charlie. So this story is one that keeps haunting the corridors of power. And also this week we saw in the European Union, there are, I think, 37 complaints have come out. So it's not just confined to Westminster, but it is a recurrent issue. How serious is the kind of allegation of this being endemic, a culture of sexual harassment?
Well, as you say, it's the second complaint labelled against Geraint, who has been suspended, and that's absolutely right. And I think it's vital that when these stories come up, when these allegations are made, that there is a system in place where the political parties take the necessary action to make sure that they can investigate that allegation properly, in quick order, and restore trust, because it's about trust, it's about power, it's about an abuse of power, potentially, depending on the particular situation or the allegation that's been made. But as long as there is a safe situation in place, or a situation in place where you can investigate quickly, you do suspend members of Parliament, you can investigate and get an outcome. And if that person is not fit for office, then they should not be in Parliament.
I mean, we've got this now second formal complaint against Geraint Davies, and in response, the Labour MP Charlotte Nichols has spoken out about her experience in Westminster, and she says when she was first elected in 2019, she was quite literally handed a list of 30 names of MPs and was told, do not accept a drink from these people, do not get in a lift with these people, do not spend time one-on-one with them. Is it really that widely known? And if it is, why is so little done about it?
Well, I think it's it's obviously very difficult, and hearing that is very difficult, because that was never my experience, and I know it tends to be, I think, or a number of the allegations that we've heard, particularly in this case, is a male MP versus female staffers. We had the Westminster scandal, where it was a number of young women that were more affected than most. So it's a harrowing sort of detail there. But I think, look, there just has to be a system in place where you hear those kind of... well, the difficult thing is getting into rumour and gossip versus the reality of an actual allegation or act that is, misconduct, essentially. So you have to have... But in all of those areas, you have to have a place and a safe space where people can come forward and say, look, I'm uncomfortable about this, or I've heard about that. And it just needs a proper investigation to make sure that there is a conclusion where if a member of Parliament that is in a position of responsibility has acted inappropriately, then they are dealt with effectively and quickly.
And full credit to the Labour Party. They've acted swiftly. They've put this guy on suspension while it's being looked into. That's the right thing to do. Moving on to the other story of the ongoing COVID inquiry, the judicial review, Boris's phone. Very interesting yesterday how Boris volunteered his phone and he kind of cut Rishi out the deal. Now, of course, the phone he gave over is a more recent phone, post April 2021. That's almost after the event of lockdown, so not sure how much we will get out of that. But how significant is it, Boris volunteering this and, if, in a sense, going over Rishi's head?
Well, it is significant. I mean, I think, look, what matters here is trust. Trust throughout COVID. It's clearly been broken because of Partygate. And the public have an absolute right to know what decisions were made, how those decisions were made during a time where everybody made such huge sacrifice. And I think, look, for Boris, I think he might have been a little bit frustrated that the story was becoming about him not handing over however many notebooks he had, 24, I believe. And so I think, look, he's determined to make sure that there is an open, transparent process. That's what everybody wants. And I think, look, he's offered to hand over one mobile phone. I think there's another mobile phone that predates... Yeah,
so the juicy phone, the old phone, that will have all of the lockdown one, that will have all the Dominic Cummings stuff, the Rishi Sunak, that will be the real, if you like, the Hancock Diaries Part 2. Is that going to have to be surrendered or seized at some point, do you think? Or will Boris just get away with that phone kind of drifting into obscurity?
Well, I think he's been very forward and volunteered that phone. I think it has to go through sort of the security services check because it hasn't been switched on for some time. That was the advice that the security sort of services gave him to not turn it back on. So you have to get over that little hurdle. But I think what the crux of it is that, look, it's not good optics. So, government has set up an inquiry. It's now taking that inquiry to court because it hadn't worked out how the process was going to work from the off. So it's very, very difficult from that respect. But I think what people want is the answers to why decisions were made, how they were made, without, particularly any of the other the noises off. And I think, look, someone has to do the sift somewhere through the information, where it's the Cabinet Office who then, if they feel that there will be irrelevant WhatsApps, there'll be WhatsApps about, what takeaway you're going to get that night. Now, is that relevant to the inquiry? Do you want to hand that all over to the inquiry for them to go through? And, it might elongate the process, because what we want is an inquiry that is concluded quickly and as open and transparent as possible. So it's the balance between who is going to do the sift of what's relevant and what isn't. And obviously that's the main crux of the dispute, whether it's the Cabinet Office in government or the independent inquiry.
The Science Minister, George Freeman, has been speaking this week, and he says it's very unlikely that the Cabinet Office is going to win this legal challenge. That's almost accepted. So why then would the Cabinet Office take their own public inquiry to court, the inquiry that they asked for, if they know that it's not going to go in their favour?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see what the outcome is of that that particular trial. But I think what the Cabinet Office will be saying is that they want to protect a number of people that obviously weren't ministers, where information is clearly not relevant, where it's on WhatsApp, which is the protection of individuals. In terms of transparency laws, they're quite out of date, because WhatsApp doesn't feature within government communications, or it shouldn't. So WhatsApp is the property of the individual rather than the government. So
I was going to ask you about that. Sorry, I'm just very intrigued. So WhatsApp is used a lot, isn't it, in Westminster for communications? You would know, of course, spending a lot of time with Michael Gove.
So I think for official government communications, it always goes through official channels. So there'll be obviously meetings, there'll be official papers and submissions and emails that are the property of the government, which could be disclosed. I think WhatsApp is not to be used for government purposes in terms of decision making. But of course, when you're moving at pace, if you're on a train and somebody says, can you just clear this press release? I mean, that would have come from a government email. It would have gone to your WhatsApp and you can reply
But we're seeing during the Hancock expose that WhatsApp absolutely was routinely used for exchanging ideas quickly between prime ministers and very senior ministers in control. So the Boris phone must have the same sort of detail in it, surely.
I suspect it might, but I think the key thing to articulate as well is that even with WhatsApp messages on confirming documents have been received or signing things off, there still would have been an official channel where those papers would have been produced by the Cabinet Office in the first place, officially.
Yeah.
So those records will be available to the inquiry also. So it's just, how much information can go to the inquiry, and within those WhatsApp messages, is there anything that's political and frank, where actually you do have a safe space, and there should be protection for ministers and advisors.
Also juicy lines. I mean, things like, let the bodies pile high, let it rip through. These more kind of throwaway comments that were perhaps used behind the scenes, if they're in WhatsApp groups, and that's a real kind of tabloid angle, a real public interest. So it's not just the policy stuff; it's the type of language used, and that's I think where the opponents of Boris would like it to go, at least.
I think that's right, but I think, look, everybody, I think, on a WhatsApp conversation may have said something that could be taken out of context, or if you don't give a full context. And that happens all the time. I mean, look, there are WhatsApps that I've exchanged with friends that I don't really understand what we were talking about 2 weeks ago, let alone 2 years ago when there was the COVID inquiry. So I think that there is a danger of this being a sensationalised sort of scandal about who said what and what was juicy and who was criticising who perhaps, or who was frustrated about this policy, or who was holding whatever. That's all fine to a degree, but is that going to get the answers as to why ministers took decisions to locked the country down 2 or 3 times? Was wearing face masks the right thing to do after a particular date? What impact this has had on schools and education, people's mental health, the backlog that we're seeing in the NHS, the backlog that we're seeing in our courts? These are the real questions that I think are affecting the country, that the inquiry needs to conclude quickly to make sure if we're ever in a situation like this again, any government, whatever party, whatever colour, gets the better results and not worry about perhaps the noise is off, where I think there has to be an element of privacy amongst individuals that are involved.
OK, Charlie Rowley, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very, very much.
I've got to say, Charlie, you've had your Weetabix today. Nice one, mate. You're on fire. Well done.
I had my cornflakes with milk, not water.
Have you actually had cornflakes this morning? Or are you winding us up?
No, I've had a glass of orange juice and a nice, beautiful cup of tea outside.
But no tea or coffee on your cornflakes?
No tea or coffee.
Do you know anyone who would do that? Do you know the 13%?
I don't, but if I did, I'd disown them.
Yeah.
But I did. Talking of I used to have peanut butter and Marmite together
I like that.
on toast.
I like that.
Charlie, what?
I do, yeah. It's quite salty, it's quite crunchy, gets you going. It's good breakfast.
Oh, no,
Good
you
combo.
two. No. That's not going to work for me. Thanks, Charlie. Good
Thanks, Charlie.
to see you.
Anyway, back to more serious news. The government has come under pressure from all sides over its anti-protest laws. Some say they're too draconian, while others argue they have not given the police enough direction to stop disruption.
Well, now the government is seeking to toughen them up. Our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, has the latest.
Oh, my... Oh. This is absolute mayhem. Absolute mayhem. People are so close to being run over. This is incredibly dangerous. There is no police presence at the moment.
Blocking roads, gluing themselves to the floor and throwing paint on historic buildings and works of art. Extreme protest groups like Just Stop Oil have been increasingly disruptive in their methods, highlighting their cause through deliberate causation of chaos. And politicians have been attempting to crack down on these groups for some time.
No, you can't just start a riot or glue yourself to the roads and get away with it.
The government's Public Order Act tried to give the police new powers to immediately crack down on protests that cause, quote, serious disruption to the life of a community. But the government's plans were watered down by the House of Lords. Now the government wants to overrule the Lords using a nifty mechanism sometimes referred to as Henry VIII powers that can change law without the consent of Parliament. The Lords' Secondary Legislation Scrutiny Committee has criticised this move, saying the proposed changes would, quote, lower the threshold for serious disruption. Continuing, the same changes were rejected by the House of Lords when put forward as amendments, and the Home Office has not provided any new arguments as to why they should now be approved. While Number 10 feels like it has the public's backing to overrule the unelected House, many in the Lords disagree. The government wants to make changes to specifically note hindrance to the making of a journey as an example of disruption. It believes that the current lack of examples of disruption in the Act leaves police in an ambiguous position, often standing uselessly as protesters block cars, vans, and even ambulances. The changes would allow police to count the snowball effect of repeated protests as more serious, enabling faster police action. But there are those who believe that the Act, even in its original form, goes too far, and that disruptive protest is a right, even if it disrupts people's business and blocks highways.
Of course, we recognise that protests can often be very inconvenient and highly disruptive, but under international law, it's important to remember that those rights can only be restricted in very limited circumstances to prevent things like serious harm from taking place.
Yet the frustrations of many in the public and in Parliament are clear.
Does the Prime Minister agree with us? The moment those activists stand on the road, they should be immediately turfed off the road, like there are in many other countries.
The government has this week confirmed it will press ahead with its changes in the face of opposition from the House of Lords and some civil liberties groups. One thing is for certain, passions are high, and this is a debate that is not going away. Tom Harwood, GB News.
You know, Addy, that's a fascinating topic. Because on the one hand, you know, all of us agree with the right to protest, but I certainly think, and I think the public do, and certainly GB News viewers, that things like Just Stop Oil, they just got too much power. The police seem to soft soap them. They bring London, they bring cities to a standstill. Working class Drivers are getting out and moving them away. They're the ones getting arrested. The Derby today, there's going to be another invasion of the course. I think the police need more powers, or they need to implement the current powers with a bit more firmness.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. I was at an Extinction Rebellion protest in London probably a month or so ago, and they have changed their tactics now because they saw that the public weren't on side with them and they saw them as being too extreme. So now they just try and engage with the public. They were handing out stickers and trying to talk to people. And I was speaking to a police officer that day, and the police officer said, this works, this is so much better. But then they've got the Just Stop Oil bunch, and that's really difficult to police and very difficult to manage.
And I wonder if it does work. I mean, it works as in it's easier to police and the public might be more sympathetic. But, of course, Just Stop Oil keep getting all the headlines.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think as long as they do that, and Aidan McGee, I know, was in later on today, he was saying yesterday, if we just ignore these people, maybe they go away. Let us know what you think, because, I mean, do you think the police need more powers, or have they just gone soft? Or Just Stop Oil, people like that, are they just in control now? Let us know what you think.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Or just share a couple of these flavour combinations, because I knew we'd get you going on this. Jaffa cakes dipped in cold milk, apparently is lovely. And Brooke says buttered Weetabix. It's amazing. I loved that as a child in the 70s. No milk, just butter spread like you would on toast. How crazy is that?
That would take about half an hour to chew.
It must be very dry, Brooke. I'm not sure about that.
That'd be like chewing a sort of bale of hay.
Yeah, literally. And Charlie says he has put cold milk on my cereal in Spain. Oh, cold tea, sorry. Cold tea on my cereal. Very good. I was in Spain. I had a hangover. Couldn't be bothered to go out for milk. Right, Charlie, I need to know, was it good? Did it taste good? Can you see why 13% of people would put tea or coffee on their cornflakes? This is the front page of the Daily Star this morning. 13% of Brits put tea and coffee on their cornflakes.
Well, I'll tell you what, Ali Costello, I didn't think these people existed. You found one within 2 minutes.
Within 2 minutes, you just call out. Yeah, it's like a boomerang. You ask something and it comes back. Charlie, you have done it. Cold tea on your cereal. Let us know what it was like. Do keep those views coming in. It's making us laugh this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK, plenty more to come on the show, including we want to know if you're ready for a heat wave. I certainly am.
Yeah, this is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. It's 6:29. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Eddie. This is GB News. And remember, please get in touch with us all the usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, ministers have been warned that extreme weather this summer could lead to economic shocks and a breakdown in public services.
Yeah, the Grantham report makes several key recommendations and comes alongside the launch of a new high-temperature warning system.
Let's speak now to senior meteorologist at the British Weather Services, Jim Dale. Good morning to you, Jim. Really, really good to see you this morning. So perhaps not a shock to people that the country would not be prepared for extreme heat.
Yeah, we tend to take things not necessarily in our stride as far as weather's concerned. Look, it's 7 degrees where I'm talking to you at the moment. There's no extremes here, I can tell you. But nonetheless, yeah, it's one of those things. I think when we get extreme weather, which we do occasionally, not this week, but nonetheless, it tends to be that we don't handle it as perhaps well as we should. It kind of hits us in the face. It sort of comes along and then everybody panics about it. I think we've got to get better at that. I think we've got to anticipate it. The forecasters like myself that put these things out, I think we got better at warning that whether it be storms, snow, heat waves, and I think that's where you're going with this. I think we get them, more or less spot on. It's just a case of what the reaction is out there, both in the commercial world and in the personal world.
I wonder, Jim, how much of this is just a British thing? Because, I mean, I've been to places like Belarus where there's land aircraft on glaciers, or you go to India where it's like 50 degrees and the trains seem to run on time. Is it because our extreme weather is so unusual, it just seems to always take us by surprise?
I think you've hit it, Martin. I think that's it. We're a temperate climate for the most part, and as we are at this moment in time, and as we've been for the last 20 odd days, we're sitting here in just leaving spring, going into early summer. Nobody's really having a problem with this weather. In fact, it's quite the reverse. We're in a situation where I hope people are enjoying the weather and doing what they need to do if they're not getting sunburn. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we sort of almost walk around in a haze until something hits us. Now, extreme weather, let's make something clear. Extreme weather is exactly that. It arrives out of the blue for the most part. It doesn't visit us that often, which is why, whether it's snow on the railway lines or extreme heat or storms that come from time to time, that I think as a nation we haven't got quite into it. We talk about the weather a lot. The British are well renowned for that, standing at the bus stop and exchanging views about what the weather's doing. But for the most part, when it actually comes to the extremes of weather, we're not quite there, I don't think. I think we're getting better at it. I think the warning services that are out there are there for those reasons, so that we can be prepared and we can learn and understand and educate ourselves about how the weather actually affects us.
And Jim, what can we do to be better at coping with extreme weather in this country, do you think?
Yeah, well, the first thing is to take note of the warnings that are actually out there. The new heat warning, that there is a voluntary thing. Those people who are at risk from extreme heat, then you can go to the Health Security Agency Met Office new app, and you can be warned about what's coming along. So I think that's the first stage, to be prepared. It's one of those things. You're armed. You know it's coming. You can take the information, and the next thing to say is that information that's given out there in terms of what to do. I think there's an education process to be had. I think that's a real thing, whether it's in schools or whether it's on TV, where we can talk about it. If you take yourself back to last summer, Ellie, we had the 41 degree heat and what to do in those situations. If that's getting through to people, and it's not being poo-pooed all the time, so we can, most people will survive that sort of temperature. It's not too many problems out there, but it's the vulnerable people. It's those people who expose themselves at those times that need to be educated in terms of what to do, how to do it. It's because we don't hit 40 degrees. We've never hit 40 degrees before until last summer. So all of these things coming along now, what we might see this summer. I think that education is a big thing. I wrote a book called Whether or Not, and within that there's a chapter called Education after a previous Prime Minister. And I think weather and extreme weather is part of that equation, where if you get that little bit of infilling in terms of what to do in extreme temperatures, what to do in blizzards and what have you, then we don't get stuck on the M62 or the M25. We don't get put ourselves out when we talk about 40 degrees, by the way, plus we're talking shade temperature. We're not talking in the sun temperature, which is always 10 or 20 degrees even hotter than that. So there you go. It's a little bit of wisdom.
I wonder, Jim, if part of the issue now as well is that we're all kind of being programmed, certainly by the media, to be terrified of the weather. I saw a picture from 1976 where during the heat wave, there's a bloke at Trafalgar Square with a bowler hat and an umbrella. He's just rolled his sleeves up and he's got his feet in the fountain, enjoying the weather. Yeah. I remember that heat wave as a kid. Whereas now it's like it's a climate emergency. The Earth is sending us a warning. We're all going to die. I wonder if part of it is we're revving up the fear, where actually we can cope with extremes of weather. We're British. We can keep calm and carry on.
I think most people can cope if you are advisedly. In other words, if you take that little bit of education, if you do the right things, it's when people do the wrong things or vulnerable people in our society that we've got to look after, make sure that they're doing the right thing as well. But yeah, there is a little bit of a British mentality, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. You roll your sleeves up, you get on with it, you put your bowler hat on and you walk away. There's a little bit of that as well. It's a little bit of a mixture. I just think that we certainly in terms of the vulnerable people, I think that's where the focus has to be. The very young, the older people, the people who've got health conditions, those are the people we should be aiming at first, and that should never be poo-poo. We should be looking at that, seeing how we can look after, making sure those warnings are out there and what to do, and hopefully the rest looks after itself. But yeah, with climate change moving upwards on the scale, and not necessarily in this country at this moment in time. You only have to look at what's gone on in China this week, and Thailand, places like that, Laos, Vietnam, all record-breaking temperatures. The floods that have been in Spain and Italy of late, and Romania, these are life-threatening things. So it doesn't just affect the vulnerable when it becomes that extreme, and that's why the process of education is so important in terms of what to do. And if we get that, then we'll be far more in a stronger position to be able to deal with what comes along.
Yes, vital to start now, Jim. Jim, we've got to ask you before we let you go, where are you this morning? Because it looks like you're standing on a roof somewhere.
Yeah, well, I said it was 7 degrees. I'm in High Wycombe at this moment in time. It's quite a nice area. It's nice and leafy and greeny and all the rest of it. Clouds, you could just see the cloud in the background. It was blue sky when I first came out here. I'm standing here in my Manchester City colours thing because today it's the FA Cup final, so I thought I'd show off a little bit and support Martin. Martin, we had a conversation. Did you say you're a United fan? I can't remember. No, Nottingham Forest, was it?
Yeah, that's right, Jim. Yeah, don't rub it in, mate. I mean, enjoy your day, but please don't try and spoil mine.
Jim, are you going to the match?
No, I'll tell you what, I would have done. It's not very far from me here, Wembley. Getting down there would be a problem. I get the tube, but no, there's no tickets left. It's an impossibility. So I went to the semi-final against Sheffield United. Bit of an easy one, that one. Sorry, Sheffield United fans, but you got to the Premiership this year, so you got some consolation. But no, I'll be looking at this one. I'll be with my family watching the game, and then we got next week the Champions League. So. There we go, and the weather's fine all week. You'll probably want to know that as well. And it does get a little bit hotter as we go through the course of the week. So that little bit of heat wave with a small h, it's not extreme, but at least the temperatures are going up, Martin. I know you want that one.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jim, I'm going to have to cut you off there, Jim Dale. Who'd have thought this conversation would run into Man City's chance to win the Cup? You'll be hoping that the sun shines on Man City later on. Thanks, mate. That was a great start today, Jim Dale. Thank you very much.
Jim Dale, thank you very much. Good luck later on, Man City. There you go.
Again, another bloke who had his Weetabix. He was bright and wide awake. Superb.
Yeah, really, really good. Right, stay with us. All the latest news and views from Saturday's newspapers are next. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
Yeah, and let's go straight to the papers now. We've got Emma Wolfe and Kevin Schofield. Loads going on today. Who are we going to start with, Els?
Let's start with Emma. Have you not got a list?
No, I haven't.
OK, so Emma, we'll look at the Telegraph, shall we? And this on the front page, that ministers had a secret unit to curb critics of lockdown.
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about this.
Well, I think this won't come as a surprise to a lot of people who are active on social media and things, but it did come as a surprise. I think it'll come as a surprise to a lot of the public. It's kind of quite a chilling, quite a sinister story on the face of it. It's front page of the Telegraph is saying that there's this counter-disinformation unit, which does sound like something out of the Chinese Communist Party, which was set up during the pandemic to tackle supposed domestic threats and was used to target people who were critical of lockdown and people who were sort of tweeting and who were questioning things like vaccine passports, the mass vaccination of children, things like that, things that I think a lot of us had our eyebrows slightly raised about. And they would either suppress or delete social media posts of these people sort of academics, doctors, high-profile people on social media who were... There's an Oxford epidemiologist, Professor Carl Hennigan, who has advised Boris Johnson. People like that, their activities, their social media posts were being monitored during the pandemic.
And I wonder, Kevin, if this feeds into that sort of feeling of, this conspiracy theory stuff that was going around. Actually, a lot of those people, history has proven, were challenging things democratically and correctly.
Yeah.
There was people at the time saying, my tweets are being suppressed, people are attacking me, am I just mad or just paranoid? But now it's true, it's a government unit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fine line to be walked here, I think. If it is about genuine misinformation, people spreading lies, propaganda on social media, I think that is important, that the government does keep an eye on that. However, if it then strays into cracking down on people who are basically just criticising government policy, then that is pretty sinister. We do live in a democracy, a free society where you are allowed to challenge what the government is saying. But if it's been done in such a way, as long as you've got evidence to back it up, but if it's been done to, as I say, suppress criticism of the government, then that is pretty chilling, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the CDU, it does, as you say, Kevin, it does definitely look at misinformation, really willful, kind of unhelpful things. The vaccine kills black people, the vaccine makes you infertile, that kind of stuff. That kind of really, damaging misinformation. But the fact is, people who are asking valid questions, which have now been proved to be well-founded, were having their social media posts repressed and were having their activities monitored.
And this is the result of an investigation by the Telegraph.
Yeah.
So this is an exclusive by them. Really, really important.
There's so much more to come out about the
I'm
whole
sure there will
lockdown.
be. And
I don't think it's going to come out in this 20-year, probably, inquiry that's going to...
I was just going to say, it does feed into the WhatsApp story at the moment, doesn't it, with Boris Johnson, the Cabinet Office and that public inquiry, because these conversations could very well have been had over WhatsApp as well. What to do with these sorts of conversations and social media.
Well, yeah, and as Emma suggested, it is going to go on, this public inquiry is going to be on for a long, long time. And I think by the time it's published, you know, the pandemic will be a distant memory, hopefully.
2026, isn't it?
Well, that's when the public evidence sessions are expected to finish. But, you know, it could be years after that before the actual report is published. So it'll be a long time, I think.
Speaking as somebody who was very active during lockdowns, and I was just saying, well, let's see the evidence on things like masks, particularly on things like vaccinating children, on compulsory vaccine mandates for NHS care workers. 100,000 people were going to get sacked at one point by Saeed Javid. This just seemed to me, well, hang on a minute, let's see the evidence. It just felt wrong to be sacking people during
and
crisis.
many doctors asking, and professors and scientists asking for the evidence before we went rushing down these routes of mass vaccination of children and things like that.
And if we're now seeing that the government was kind of pushing back against it, I think it's an incredibly interesting story. It feels slightly Orwellian.
Does feel.
That's where we are. OK, shall we move on?
Yes, Kevin, let's look at the Mail, shall we? And this is sports fans face rail chaos today.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know you were discussing it earlier, and a huge day of sport, a mass movement of people from Manchester down to London to see the FA Cup final, but they're going to find it very difficult. We saw the supporters earlier on, having to get coaches instead of trains because of these strikes, which have clearly been timed to cause maximum disruption, which is the whole point of strike action, to use leverage to try and bring about an end to the dispute. However, it doesn't look as though that's going to happen anytime soon. There's a senior rail source quoted in this story saying that it could go on certainly for the rest of the year. And we're already approaching the first anniversary of the first rail strikes, incredibly. And, there doesn't seem to be any resolution in sight. Both sides seem to have been completely dug in and no room for compromise. And I think at the moment, I think at the beginning of the industrial action, I think there probably was a lot of public sympathy for rail workers. The longer it's gone on, I just wonder whether that is starting to shift now and people are losing sympathy.
Did people just get used to the trains being a bit rubbish?
Well, there is that as well. It becomes priced in, almost. People are just like, well, a strike, it's not an unusual occurrence. They say, oh, well, strike again, shrug your shoulders, I'll just find alternative. And then you're less likely, once it does end, to go back to the rail, because in your head you're thinking it's unreliable. Yeah.
Well, we've had a viewer in saying almost exactly that. This is from Lee. Good morning to you, Lee, who says, I have to say, over the last year, I've now completely given up on travelling by train. They're too reliable and they are too run down. So this is where the unions could be biting their nose off to spite their face.
And I think across the public services, though, the other day I cycled past one of the big hospitals in London and I thought, are we on strike today? They're on strike today. There was a load of ambulances backed up. It's almost as though these big strikes, which used to be big news, are just not such a big deal anymore because we're slightly getting used to them. Not that they are in any way acceptable, not that it's a way to run a country, absolutely not.
And it's ironic, isn't it?
It's not necessarily the headline, is it?
Yeah, but they're trying to get us out of our cars. They're trying to tax us out of our cars, buy an electric vehicle. Yesterday we covered the fact that there's a huge drop in demand for them because they're now pricey. And yet here we are. We can't rely on the train, so a lot of people like today are packing onto the roads. They're having to use the roads, and no doubt they'll fall foul of Sadiq Khan's ULEZ.
Well, I was going to say, it's as ridiculous as the congestion charge, which, rather than keeping cities moving, basically sends people round and around and around and around in all sorts of funny, in the low-traffic neighbourhoods and all of that.
Yep, OK. Shall we move on to one of
yours? Some good news.
Test promises faster cancer diagnosis. Hurrah for that.
Yeah, really good news on the front of the Times. This is a new blood test which can diagnose, a really simple blood test, can diagnose around 50 different types of cancer, which they're saying, scientists are saying, could save thousands of lives. It's a big British trial which was run at Oxford University of 5,500 people. And in 2/3 of these simple blood samples that were taken, the tech the test gave a correct diagnosis. It's a more accurate test in older people, and obviously it's more accurate in more advanced cancers. What it does is it finds little fragments of tumour DNA circulating around the bloodstream. It picks them up, and it can also tell you where that's come from in the body. And it's also, the great thing about this test, it seems to be also alerting, sort of sending out cancer signals and alerting doctors to other sites in the body where there might be cancers lurking. So it is really, really good news. This is a huge oncology conference, the biggest American oncology conference that's happening in Chicago at the moment, ASCO. And lots of good news coming out of that. And with people living longer, more and more and more people are going to be encountering cancer in their 70s and 80s.
A record backlog,
90s.
Of course, for a diagnosis on the NHS.
Yeah, well, terrible backlogs, months when people just simply were not being tested or diagnosed. So this kind of thing, hopefully it's cheap, hopefully it's as simple as it sounds.
Yeah,
right.
Fingers crossed. Kevin, we'll finish with this story, shall we? It's a story in the Express. At last, banks putting up saving rates.
Yeah, well, this is a campaign that the Express have had. Now, as we know, interest rates have been going up now month upon month for quite some time. Now, the banks have been very quick to slap the interest rate rise on mortgages, and people are seeing that in their monthly bills, but they've been, criticised for being too slow to put it on savings accounts as well. But it looks as though, finally, they're starting to do so. So it's good news for savers. Obviously, interest rate rises are generally seen as a bad thing because, as I say, it adds hundreds of pounds a month to people's mortgage bills. However, if you are a pensioner, for instance, and you have to rely on your savings income, this is a good thing. And there's one actually account which has an unbelievable interest rate of 9%, which is the highest headline rate available since 2011. So, I actually did notice, I've not got much savings at all, but I did notice yesterday, I looked, I did see, I was like, my goodness, interest. I've never had interest in such a long time. And actually, I've got some interest. But yeah, so as I say, that's the sort of flip side to the generally bad news of interest rate rises.
I mean, the question is, what's taken so long?
Well, clearly, putting it on savings costs the banks money, whereas putting it on mortgages earns them money. So you can understand from their point of view why they're more quick to do one than the other.
Pockets and slow to give it back. 'Twas ever done.
Well, Emma, Kevin, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid, but thank you very much. You're going to be back in the next hour.
That's superb. Thank you. OK. Now, accidental drownings on Britain's waterways have been in the news a lot lately, and this is backed up by new figures, with 597 dying last year.
Well, it follows on from this week's incident in Bournemouth, in which a 12-year-old girl from Buckinghamshire and a 17-year-old boy from Southampton died after getting into trouble in the water.
But most incidents, some 60%, happen on inland waters, such as rivers, canals, reservoirs and lakes.
Well, the charity director of the Royal Life Saving Society UK, Lee Hurd, is with us now. Good morning to you, Lee. Thank you very much for joining us. And as we just said, it does feel as though we are hearing more and more of these heartbreaking stories more often. Why is this happening so often? Why are people dying in the water in the UK?
I think there's a few things to note, really. Around 50% of the drownings happen in the summer months, so we know there's a direct correlation between the weather starting to warm up and people getting into trouble in the water. And I noted you made the comment about majority of drownings happening inland. Hardly any drownings happen in swimming pools, and it's reduced the coast. And we know the reason for this is that there's professional supervision in those areas. Unfortunately, inland waterways are so accessible, they're around areas of high population. There's no supervision, so we've got people going there to enjoy the water, to cool off, and there's no backstop so that if they do get into trouble, there's no one there to rescue them. And there's also this disconnect between the majority of children, especially in England, learning to swim in a warm, heated swimming pool, and them then having the perception that they can go to a cold, open body of water and those skills translate, and they simply don't. Learning to swim in a warm, heated swimming pool with a lifeguard on the side doesn't translate into a cold, deep, open water lake with currents in it.
And also, of course, Lee, there's this huge disconnect between a heat wave temperature and then the temperature of the water often could be like 4 degrees, like as cold as a fridge. It takes a long time for bodies of water to heat up, doesn't it? So even though it feels like a scorcher above water, as it were, in the water, it's a very different picture.
Yeah, it is. And again, we're used to swimming in swimming pool temperature. Open water swimming has become very popular in the UK, and that's amazing. But people that open water swim do take time to get their body used to the cold water. They go in slowly and they train and train and train so that they can then have the ability to swim. The majority of young people, especially boys that are getting into trouble, don't have that training. So they're jumping in the water when the water is incredibly cold. And what it does is send their body into cold water shock, which means it's a physiological response to cold water, which makes them hyperventilate. And even the strongest swimmers struggle to survive in that water. And then even if they're not affected by cold water shock, within 10-15 minutes their muscles will start to wean, and then that makes it really difficult to swim. So again, we see groups of young lads especially trying to swim large distances in cold water, and they're just not able to get themselves back because they go into what we call swim failure.
I swim in rivers with my kids. My boy's 14, my daughter's 9, but I get them a cheap wetsuit. You can get a cheap wetsuit from cheap supermarkets now, even like 20 quid, and it keeps them warm and it keeps them buoyant. So there are simple tips like that parents particularly can encourage their children to do, aren't there?
Yeah, wetsuits certainly help keep people warmer and keep the cold temperature away. What we would say to anybody is that if you are going to go into cold open water, we would prefer you to do it where there's professional lifeguards there, because if you do get into trouble, there's someone there to save you. But if people are going to enter the water, there's a few simple things that they can remember. Firstly, make sure there is supervision on the side. So if you are going to enter the water, make sure there's someone there watching you so that if you do get into trouble, they can call the emergency services immediately on 999 and get help to you. And if you see someone in the water or you feel overwhelmed yourself, our simple message is to stay calm, lie on your back, float on your back, keep your airway clear. And what that does is give you vital minutes for someone to come and help you raise the alarm, get the emergency services there and get you out safely.
OK, lovely to see you this morning, Lee Hurd. Thank you very much. Very vital advice there as well. Stay with us. Lots more to come. The latest on the train strikes and getting to that big match today. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest forecast. I'm Mark Wilson. And after a fine, dry, settled week of weather across the country, it's more of the same through this weekend. Staying settled, lots of sunshine to come, but at times there will be some low clouds towards the east. Why is it so settled at the moment? It's all thanks to this area of high pressure. It really hasn't moved very far at all through the week, and it's going to stay through this coming weekend. So that's what's bringing all the dry weather, but also some cloud towards the east, which I'll just talk about a bit later on. So here's the picture for the first thing on Saturday morning. A fine start to the day for the vast majority. Lots of sunshine. Any cloud will tend to lift and break through the morning, but just a couple of exceptions to the rule. Across the very far north of Scotland here, there'll be thicker cloud, even the odd spot of rain possible, and slightly patchier cloud at times across some southeastern parts. But as I said, for the vast majority, a fine day to come. And in that sunshine, feeling warm as well. Afternoon highs of 21 to 23 degrees for many central and western parts, so warmer than on Friday. Temperatures still a bit cooler, though, towards that North Sea coast. Now, through the rest of Saturday into the evening and overnight, it's more of the same. It stays dry across the board. Lengthy clear skies, one or two mist and fog patches. But through the night, we'll start to see some lower clouds spreading in across eastern Scotland into eastern and central parts of England as well, as that cloud moves westwards through the night. Here it won't be quite so cool, but further towards the west, another chilly night to come. Temperatures widely falling into single figures. Colder than that in some rural spots. So we get off to a bit of an east-west start to the day on Sunday morning. Quite cloudy across some central and eastern parts. Sunnier from the word go across the west. But through the day, much of that cloud will lift and break. So once again, by the time we get through to the late morning, early afternoon, another fine picture across the board. Lots of sunshine to come. Just a bit more cloud across the very far north, with the odd spot of rain across Orkney and Shetland, and more cloud down that North Sea coast. But again, in that sunshine, another warm day to come, 21 to 23 degrees. And it stays fine, dry and settled for most areas into the early part of next week. High pressure still dominating, so lots more sunshine to come. And in that sunshine, once again, it will be pleasantly warm with highs up to the low 20s. I'll see you soon.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it. like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 3rd of June. Today.
You're travelling by train? Think again. Train services are to be crippled yet again as another strike hits the rail network today. Tens of thousands of Mancunians will be travelling south to the FA Cup final, but fortunately for Manchester United, many of their fans will already be here, of course, because they're Cockneys.
A second complaint has been brought against Swansea MP Geraint Davies as he remains suspended from the Labour Party pending an investigation into sexual misconduct. Does Westminster have a sex pest problem?
And do you know what to put in your recycling bins? The government is set to launch a drive to stop people putting the wrong types of items in their recycling. Items like plastic bags and toothpaste tubes cannot be processed in recycling centres.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
It's been a dry week of weather across the UK through this week, but is the fine and sunny weather going to continue across the country through this weekend? Find out all the details with me here on GB News.
Yeah, top of the morning, I'm Martin Daubney.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. We're really enjoying this morning. I've got you going this morning on the front page of the Daily Star. 13% of British people put tea and coffee on their cornflakes.
Yeah, and when you first read this out this morning, I thought this is absolute witchcraft. There cannot be anybody out there who possibly does this. Ellie, you found somebody within 2 minutes who does it.
This is it. This is it. GB News viewers, they don't ever let us down. Kerry says, good morning, Ellie and Martin. You brighten my day.
Right.
Well, you brighten ours as well, Kerry. I don't like milk, so I often use black coffee on my Weetabix. It's especially nice on the chocolate ones.
I think there's something about Weetabix that's bringing out people's inner demons, because here's another one. Bob says, try boiling water on Weetabix and then add honey or sugar to die for.
Yeah, not sure about that. Anita says, a fried egg, Marmite and a raw onion sandwich is the best breakfast. Works on shredded wheat as well.
What, the raw onion? Raw onion on shredded wheat?
Fried egg and raw onion on shredded wheat.
Who are these people?
Who are these? And again, another person, Joy, who says, hi, Ellie, butter on Weetabix is lovely. The butter is best from the fridge and you have to spread it thickly on your Weetabix.
Check this one out, Els. Nikki says, I like ginger biscuits dipped in orange cordial.
See, that one I don't think is too crazy, Nikki, because I think tropical flavours. Yeah, ginger and orange, you can see that working.
But there's a precise combination of the temperature of a tea and the dippage and the angle.
Yeah,
the cold cordial, it won't cut the mustard.
No, that's true, actually. That is true. Also, lots of people getting in touch on the FA Cup as well. Frederick says, I don't envy those travelling up to Wembley. The trains are going to be chaotic. I'm going to be enjoying the game from the comfort of my local pub and I can't wait. I think that's probably wise, Frederick.
Yeah, and I had a little dig there about Man United fans being Londoners. You know, it's just an old joke. Please don't direct your abuse to me. I am going to watch the final today with a couple of my mates in London who are Man United fans.
But you're not wrong, are you? Because Andrew's been in touch.
Oh, yeah, this kind of reconfirms my position. Andrew, thank you. You've inadvertently dug me out of a hole here. As a true Man City fan of 3 years now, it's a true fan, I am so pleased. I live in Wembley and will not be held up by the rail strikes. I am one day looking forward to going to Manchester. Andrew, you live in London, you live in Wembley, you've been a Man City fan for 3 years and you haven't even been to Manchester. What a stereotype. Just confirm.
Oh, dear.
Andrew, beautiful.
Yeah, well, the reason we're talking about this, of course, is because the FA Cup final is going ahead today. 90,000 fans are going to be heading to Wembley Stadium.
Yeah, but of course, this weekend's rail strikes will have a major effect on Manchester United and City supporters travelling down from the north of England.
Well, we're joined now by our reporter, Sophie Reaper, who's in Manchester for us now. Good morning to you, Sophie. Oh, we love the scarf. She's getting in the spirit. This has caused so much disruption, hasn't it, for travelling fans? And it's such a big day of sport for them, isn't it?
It's one of the biggest days of the sporting season. We're about 8 hours away now from kick-off in a historic derby between Manchester United, you can see Marcus Rashford there on one side, and Manchester City, Erling Haaland on the other side. Now, as you mentioned, there's been huge disruption that's affecting today's match. There are no trains running today between Manchester and London due to strikes for ASLEV and the RMT. As a result, the FA has been forced to put on 60 coaches per team in order to help those fans travel down from Manchester to London. Now, you may notice a distinct lack of fans behind me. I think there may still be one coach. They are coming in dribs and drabs, but the majority of fans will already be on their way down to Wembley by now. Of course, it's about a 4 or 5 hour journey anyway, but when you factor in the fact they'll be on a coach, which will obviously need to make stops at some point, it is quite a lengthy journey. I was speaking to one fan this morning who told me she's been up since 4 a.m. Just to make sure she was here in time for the first coaches departing at 6:30 this morning. Now, this is a historic game that people will want to be there for. It's the first time Manchester United and Manchester City will be playing each other in an FA Cup final. There's lots to play for. Man City are, of course, going for that treble. If they win today and the Champions League next week, they will win. They'll have won that treble. United, of course, going for the double, having won the Carabao Cup back in February against Newcastle. So there's lots to play for today. And, of course, not to mention the fact that there's a historic rivalry between these two Manchester iconic teams.
There'll be lots to play for. And we heard you earlier talking to Anne. How are the fans feeling? Are you getting a sense that they're nervous about getting down to London on time? Are they annoyed about the rail strikes, or are they just trying to enjoy it and make the best of the experience?
Well, I think that the word that absolutely epitomises the fans' feeling towards this is frustration. Of course, we've been dealing with train strikes for almost 12 months now. It is an issue that's facing people. Just, a few weeks ago, we had exactly the same thing for Eurovision. So I think people, they're just sick of these strikes now. Of course, this is a huge day for Man City and Man United fans, and they just want things to go as smoothly as possible. They've got enough stress to worry about with the outcome of the game, never mind actually making it down to Wembley in the first place. So I think that's just kind of contributing to the overall difficulty of things.
OK, Sophie Reaper, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed, and I love that scarf. Brilliant work.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by the legend Aidan McGee, smelling wonderful as ever, my friend, and looking very dapper for a cup final day, I'd expect.
Get on with the sport.
We have got a bit of a bromance on the go.
Yeah,
Let's move on swiftly. Right, it's a heavyweight challenge between the two Mancunian teams.
Yeah.
City are clear favourites, but Man U, they won't roll over lightly, will they?
No, their legacy, their history is at stake here. So they're going for a double domestic trophy. The domestic haul, they won the Carabao Cup, as Sophie mentioned, back in February against Newcastle at Wembley. Difficult thing to do. They've also finished in the top four. Huge improvement on last season where they were under Ralph Rangnick. I do think sometimes it was, sometimes the progress can be overstated because it's from getting to where they were to where they are now. It's probably not as difficult as it looks when you're Manchester United and all the wherewithal they have. However, They won the treble in 1999. They've got history in 1977 of stopping Liverpool winning the treble, and that was huge for them because that was in 1977, and then 22 years later in Barcelona, they won the treble against Bayern Munich. So they say they're the only British club to have done a treble, and they've got to save that today. And you know, if you're going to give a team talk, it's the easiest one in the world. And in some ways, this United team could establish themselves as kind of, you know, put a marker down as in the historic sense as being the team that stopped City winning the treble. And also for City, all right, I think they would even relinquish today's trophy just to win the Champions League. The Champions League is so important to what they want to do. The big money's been in there since 2008. I was there when it happened. And if you look at Chelsea's big money went in 2003. Within 9 years, they were Champions League winners. They've been finalists 4 years before. City are behind schedule in that regard. It's a huge game for them today.
And for the neutral fan, we're back to the magic of a 3 o'clock kickoff. I mean, this is the FA Cup of my boyhood, rather than a late kickoff for the telly. Is that because they just don't want the fans to get to, how should you put it, refreshed before kickoff?
Possibly. Look, the train. They've known about the train strike for some time now. There's also the issue of Epsom, which we'll probably discuss later on. That's the derby's happening at 1:30 as well. So that's been adapted for the 3 o'clock kickoff. There's not been a 3 o'clock since 2011 when Manchester City beat Stoke. I was at Man United. I was at Blackburn that day watching United win the league. It was a big day for Manchester that day because City won the FA Cup, their first major trophy since 1976, and United won the league, and they faced off in the Charity Shield later in the year. But however, we thought that year that, given how well the FA Cup final performed in terms of the ratings, we thought 3 o'clock would be the norm, and we've not seen it for 12 years, which is quite a surprise. But back to normal today.
Yeah, big sporting day. We've got to talk about the Epsom Derby, potential protest disruption.
Yeah, we touched on it yesterday. Hugely difficult to manage this. You know, stopping people getting over fences. It's a long track. It's not like securing the perimeter of a football pitch where you've got 4 sides and you've got security used to being there on a week-to-week basis. It's not quite the same at horse racing events. But look, I think that they have to get together, as I mentioned yesterday, they have to get together and discuss a way of kind of marginalising these people, because otherwise they're going to be the story every single time there's a horse racing event. We saw it in the National, a couple of months ago?
Yeah, that's right. Now,
your comments were very popular on that yesterday, Aidan.
Yeah, they were.
Marginalising. It's the key. It's the key. We saw it in other walks of life. Some of these people... I'm not saying the protesters are morons. We had morons in football when we're talking about hooligans, and only when they were marginalised and the opportunity to earn notoriety was gone did they start evaporating.
And, of course, there is a race going on today. Let's talk about Frankie Dettori's, and we'll talk about more detail next time, Aidan. But quickly, Dettori, last ever race, 29-year career. He's on a fancied horse, 4.3 to 1. He's worth a nibble.
Yeah, without doubt, yeah. I mean, he's 52 years old. He won yesterday, of course, as well. He's under a horse called Arrest, trained by John and Thady Gosden. 1:30, the 244th Derby, and I hope that we're talking about him or an equally good story today, rather than talking about protesters.
Hear to that.
Tea or coffee on your Weetabix in the morning? Or your cornflakes?
No, I wouldn't. No, I drink tea at home and coffee when I'm out. Last night I had a really nice steak. I bought it from Waitrose. Paid £20 for it.
You sent me a picture of it.
I did, yeah. It's a lovely piece, and I've got a thing about asparagus at the moment. I love having asparagus. I have asparagus every Friday.
That's in season.
It is. Just the steak. I sliced up the steak, chucked it in. It cooks so easily.
But asparagus and steak, that's not unusual. What about something unusual?
Something unusual. No, I'm quite a conservative eater, actually.
Oh, there you go. You're not in the 13%.
Sorry.
Do get in touch if you're one of the 13% of the British public that has tea or coffee on their cornflakes. We want to hear from you this morning. Aidan, thanks very much.
Good to see you.
There's one I've got to really quickly bring in. This is just crazy. Joy says, cream crackers broken up, pour over a cup of hot tea and sprinkle with sugar. I think you're a bit cream crackers, Joy.
Yeah. Honestly, where are we finding you? Do keep them coming in. GBViews at gbnews.com. We're going to bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
And a rescue mission has been completed after 2 passenger trains collided in India. At least 288 people have been killed and 850 injured, making it the country's deadliest rail accident in more than a decade. The Coromandel Express, which runs from Kolkata to Chennai, crashed into the Howrah Superfast Express in the eastern state of Odisha. The army has been deployed to help with the evacuation of the injured.
Diesel prices fell by a record of almost 12 pence last month, the biggest drop in 1 month for over 2 decades. The RAC says the average price of diesel dropped from 158.9 pence to 147 pence in May, the 7th consecutive month in which UK pump prices reduced. This means the cost of filling up a typical family car has fallen by £6.50.
And it's costing consumers twice the price of ordering groceries on delivery apps such as Deliveroo or Uber Eats rather than buying them directly in store. Consumer group Which found consumers would pay on average 8% more for Morrison's groceries via Amazon due to the convenience. It comes amid a year of record increases in food inflation. In one case, unsalted butter costs 45% more on Amazon than in supermarkets, and Asda's own brand wine was £2 more expensive online. On to some politics now, and a second complaint has been levelled against Swansea MP for Labour Geraint Davis as he remains suspended from the Labour Party pending an investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct.
Westminster is no newcomer when it comes to a sex problem, with new MPs often warned to stay away from a number of dodgy colleagues.
And we're joined again by former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Charlie, thanks for joining us again. We had a fabulous hour last time, a serious topic to start this discussion. A second allegation against Geraint Davis, counter-allegations from Charlotte Nicholas, MP for Labour, saying there's somebody on the opposition front bench that she's complained about, maintained the police had little interest in pursuing this. How widespread is this problem and how robust a procedure is in place to tackle it?
Well, thank you for having me back. And I think, look, what's concerning is that this is a story that, as you rightly said at the top there, it just keeps coming back. You know, we keep hearing about allegations that are made against MPs where there is misconduct that's taken place. And so every time you hear the story, you hear that the House of Parliament has put in a process to make sure that, you know, you can go to an independent body to make a complaint and that'll be dealt with. You can go through the whips, you can go and see the political party, whoever you're working for, and it'll be dealt with in quick order. And it's clearly not, because these issues just keep on coming back, and it just really derails trust within the public and puts people, very, very good people, off politics altogether. So very concerning reports. Look, the Labour Party have acted quickly in this case to suspend the MP. That's the right thing to do, pending investigation. But we've got to root out perhaps these people coming into politics in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, sticking with Charlotte Nichols and that really alarming testimony, she said that when she first became an MP in 2019, she was handed a list of names, 30 names on that list of MPs, and the advice was, do not receive a drink from these people, do not get into a lift with them, do not work closely one-on-one. I mean, that's very, very alarming, isn't it, to hear? Stella Creasy, another Labour MP, says, basically, we need to change something. There's a call to action from her. She says the party's complaints process needs to be looked at. Do you think that could be the way to go on this?
I think it's got to be. And, you know, what's concerning is that's, you know, one MP having a conversation with a new entry MP to say, don't go near these colleagues. Now, the question that you've got to ask is, if that is known about, or if there is any kind of misconduct, you know, that needs to be looked into, why MPs don't feel as though that they've been able to raise the complaint at the very top, rather than just warning other colleagues to, you know, tread carefully. It shouldn't be that way. There has to be a tough approach, and it happens with every political party. That's you can't get away from that. So it's just working out the process in which you get good people into politics. Is there a culture within Westminster that creates some of these behaviours? It shouldn't do. That shouldn't be acceptable anywhere. So we've really got to get to the bottom of why we keep hearing these stories and this scandal, as you say, that keeps coming back.
And at its heart, it's an imbalance of power. It's older, typically men, who are successful and more powerful, and a lot of junior staff come in, of course, who are ambitious, and we've seen in show business this week. It's not just confined to politics.
Exactly, and I think this week has highlighted that very question about the abuse of power. And as I say, look, you've got some very, very good, young, enthusiastic people out there that want to get into politics, that where you hear the stories about the abuse of power between a particular employer, and those relationships, and it puts people off, and it really it does our politics no good in this country. You have to have a system whereby people that are very good apply for the jobs, get the jobs on merit, and have the ability to make a complaint where things go wrong.
It's a crying shame if it's putting off more women coming into politics. You know, we have a gender imbalance already. You know, we could do with more women in politics. So if they're particularly seeing this, doesn't make it the most appealing career move, does it?
No, it doesn't. And you're absolutely right. No, there should be no barrier to anybody getting into politics, whether it's their gender, their race, their sexual orientation. But when you hear these kinds of stories, it really is off-putting, and we need to stamp it out.
Yeah.
Charlie, let's touch upon the ongoing WhatsApp Cabinet Office public inquiry row. We've been talking about it for several days now, but quite extraordinary development that Boris Johnson has now bypassed the Cabinet and has personally given over this phone, unredacted, to the public inquiry. What do you make of that as a move?
Well, I think he is clearly in a position where he wants to be as open as possible. He was the Prime Minister at the time, and I feel he probably thinks that there's not been the best start to getting this inquiry ongoing, where you've got a dispute between the Cabinet Office and the current government that set up the inquiry in the first place. They're now in a legal dispute. I think for him, he'd want to see, for his part, all the things that he did when he was Prime Minister, making those decisions, that is open and as transparent as possible, because there has been a breakdown in trust between the public and the government when it came to COVID at the time.
I wonder, Charlie, I'm just hypothesising here. Boris was well known for being, how should we put it, more questioning of lockdowns. He was had a more libertarian approach. And I wonder, with history having now passed, his position now is being seen more as a more sensible position. Is that why you think he's thinking, well, actually, show the phones and you'll see actually that history has proved me right? Now, I know that's speculation, but he seems very willing to surrender his stuff. That would suggest to me that he's not trying to hide things, but he actually wants to get it out there.
Well, I think you could be right. Could be
wrong.
But he... and look, when you're in that environment and when you're dealing with something, a global pandemic that no one's dealt with before, obviously mistakes have been made. And I think, look, this isn't a political witch hunt. This isn't something where you saw 1 million people necessarily protest against the government's actions. People understood that the government was working in very, very difficult circumstances, where lockdown, yes, was right in certain circumstances, but, after the first wave and first lockdown, the questions then amount to, well, what happened later on? Why were decisions being made? Why were we sort of seeing a different traffic light system to a zonal scheme to different areas of the country being locked down at different times? Those are the kind of questions where you need to ask, why did ministers make the decisions that they did? And I think it's absolutely worth having as much of that information given to the inquiry and put out into the public domain as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Charlie, we love seeing you. Thank you very much. That was brilliant.
Superb way to start the day. Thank you, mate.
Thank you. My day...
Here we go.
I couldn't help but hear you get into a wetsuit.
Yes.
Every day.
Yes, I do. It's getting increasingly difficult. But I do encourage safe swimming with my kids. The dangers are out there. And a wetsuit, you can get them from places like Aldi and Lidl for like 20, 25 quid, and it keeps the kids buoyant, keeps them warm, and you don't have to be so worried about open water. What about you? You wetsuit man?
I know what I'll be doing later on.
Watching the cup final.
I will, yes. But if I do take a dip, I'll take up your advice.
Yeah, be sure to buy a wetsuit,
Be
Charlie.
sure.
Thank you very much. Oh, dear, I love the silliness. Right, lots more to come, including all of the showbiz stories with our lovely Stephanie Tecci. That's next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Ellie, and please do keep your views coming in this morning. We are having lots of fun with them. We've been talking about the Daily Star front page all morning. Woo! 13% of British people enjoy tea and coffee on their cornflakes in the morning. You've heard that right this morning. Absolutely bonkers. But apparently lots of you do it. Charlie's been in touch saying, yes, Ellie, I put cold tea on my cereal whilst nursing a hangover. It's brilliant. It makes the cereal so much sweeter.
Well, at least you can blame the drink. But what about Neil here? Listen to this. Hi, GB News. How about cold custard on your cornflakes? And also, very good is cracked pepper on your strawberries.
No, I think he's winding us up.
I don't think he is.
Anyway. John says, whoever has a tea or coffee on their cereal should go to see a psychiatrist. Don't mince your words, John. And Linda says, cornflakes with pure orange juice is lovely.
But listen to this one. I can't believe I'm actually seeing this. Mark says sardines in brine on Weetabix. Spread with marmalade.
Oh, your voice broke there.
I know.
The shock was real.
I've been having it for years. Absolutely fantastic.
Oh,
Can you believe that? Fish, Weetabix, marmalade. There's 3 levels of wrong.
Oh, yeah, you're right. There's 3 levels of wrong. It's not good at all. Nikki says, what does Aidan McGee smell of? Because Martin was really complimenting Aidan McGee.
Yeah, no, I've got the bottle here. I'm not allowed to name the brand. I've been told off by Pearl. But apparently it costs 260 quid a go, and he gives me a squirt. It's about $5 worth.
He goes round the newsroom just squirting it on people.
Yeah.
Sounds wrong, doesn't it? But
It does, but it's one of those mornings. But it does smell wonderful.
It does smell,
yeah,
it smells nice, to be fair. Lots of you getting in touch on the FA strikes, well, almost, FA Cup and train strikes. Bill from Glasgow says, hi, Ellie and Martin, I know it won't happen, but given the rail strikes, surely the game should have just been played in Manchester. I'm sure lots of people will agree with that thought today, Bill.
Yeah, but then, of course, a lot of those Mancunian Londoners wouldn't have been able to make it up. That's been an old joke. Beverly from Newcastle, it's not just today that the strikes are affecting people. My daughter was due to travel to London tomorrow, checked, and her train's cancelled due to the knock-on effects of the strikes. Of course, there's a bit of a crossover. So, yeah, and another year of mayhem ahead. Anyway, hopefully we'll enjoy the match today.
Yep, do keep those views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK, Caroline Flack's mum says ITV has learnt nothing from the death of her daughter.
Yes, Christine Flack gave an interview last night to BBC Newsnight and said ITV treats its presenters like commodities. And she also said that she's worried for Philip Schofield.
Yeah, and Showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci joins us now. Steph, a really interesting development to the story we've been talking about all week about Philip Schofield, because, of course, when Schofield mentioned in his interview that this is how Caroline Flack felt, there was initially a massive backlash to that from a lot of people.
Yeah.
But now Christine Flack has stepped in and said, actually, he has a point.
Yeah, because Christine Flack, more than anyone, she's done a lot of work on mental health since Caroline took her life in 2020. And Christine, more than anyone, she knows what the fallout is from ITV and when you're kind of left to your own devices. Caroline took her life the day after she learned that she was going to be tried, sent to trial for assaulting her boyfriend. And she had lost Love Island, which was her beloved baby, her show, and, you know, there was a lot of criticism at the time that ITV didn't do much to support Caroline, and it feels a bit like history repeating itself with Philip Schofield. But as you said, Martin, there has been a backlash because Caroline was that was more of a personal matter. She hadn't lied to ITV, so maybe if she did stay alive, she would have had more support from them. But Philip Schofield has come out in this interview with BBC and said that he does feel like taking his own life. So that is a bit of a call to action, and all week we have been talking about duty of care. I think there has been a lot of focus on the duty of care for his lover, but maybe not towards Philip Schofield. He is one of their products. He has been there for 40 years. But ITV say, you know, the relationships we have with those we work with are based on trust. Philip made assurances to us and his agency, which he now acknowledges were untrue, and we feel badly let down. As a producer and broadcaster, ITV takes its responsibilities around duty of care seriously and has robust and well-established processes in place to support the mental and physical health of employees and all those we work with.
So that's what ITV have said, and of course that's in response to this interview with Caroline Flack's mother. What were the main takeaways of that interview for you?
Well, we have a clip that we can play for audiences at home, but the main thing she said is that she feels that ITV do have that responsibility of duty of care, and she feels like almost the presenters there are treated like commodities. So we have a clip we'll play now.
It worries me because it's relentless on him. I feel, you know, I do feel worried for him. He knew Caroline, and I must say when she died, he was very upset. And I think he's now realising even more what she went through. No, they haven't learnt anything. They haven't. They treat them as commodities. And I know it's a lovely job and I know they earn money, but also the television stations that earn money from them. But they're not commodities. They're people and they're employed. And if my employee didn't take care of me, there'd be all hell to pay.
You see, there is that two-sided argument. I know we've been very much focused on the scandal, but there is the mental health of Philip Schofield. And, you know, in that interview with BBC, he says that his daughters are staying with him day and night to make sure he doesn't do the worst. I don't think anybody wants blood on their hands out of this scandal. So, you know, we know ITV executives will be going to Parliament next week where they will face questions about duty of care. And I think it's a bigger conversation situation now more than Philip Schofield. We're now looking at the whole media landscape and making sure that anybody who works within the media will have that duty of care if the need arises.
Yeah, very important conversations to have as well, Stephanie. There's another part to this story about the Soap Awards, because Philip Schofield was meant to be presenting the Soap Awards tonight. He's, of course, not doing that anymore. We have a stand-in presenter.
We have a stand-in, the lovely Jane McDonald, who is soap crazy. She put a statement out and she said she loves soaps and she's quite honoured that she'll be able to present tonight's show. It won't be on air till Tuesday, but the Soap Awards is one of the creme de la creme of TV awards for Britain. Philip Schofield was hoping he could hold on to that, because when he's announced he was stepping down from This Morning, he was like, I'll be back for the Soap Awards, but obviously he's lost that. And now, so I think it will be still a big talking point of the Soap Awards. And Jane does have big shoes to fill, you know. We cannot deny that Philip Schofield hasn't been a talented presenter, so she will have to kind of fill that gap. But ITV now are going to have to find replacements, because as we know, on Monday, Holly's coming back to the sofa. She's quite adamant. She's watched the interview with Philip, and sources are saying, you know, while she's saddened about what's happened, the show must go on. So she will be presenting the show alongside Josie Gibson on Monday.
Surprising.
Yeah.
It is, because a lot of people were saying Alison, but I think Alison will still be drafted in maybe the week after next.
Alison Hammond was in tears on the show yesterday, saying she still loves Philip, but she admits he's done wrong. Is it the right thing for Holly to go back? You mentioned about the MPs cross-examining ITV top brass. That's on Wednesday, I believe.
Yes, it is.
So anything could come out of that on Wednesday. Why go back Monday? Why not just wait until after Wednesday?
I think Holly, she's been pretty strong through this, because I think most people would have stepped back and said, forget it. But I think from what I've read and what I've heard, Holly's persistent to be like, I'm not guilty of doing anything wrong. And by her standing down, that's her giving into cancel culture. And she's got a bigger brand, bigger than This Morning. If she steps back from This Morning, she has to step back from the rest of her deals. So I think for Holly, it's business as usual. But like Alison, I think she's going to have to address it. She cannot just come in on Monday on the sofa and not mention Philip and not mention that there has been a change in the show, and there will be likely more changes to come.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting to see what she says on Monday. Stephanie Tetchy, thank you so much,
guys.
Thank you.
Superb roundup. OK, more to come, including, do you know what to recycle? Do you even know what each wheelie bin is for? Well, I certainly do, because I get really hot under the collar about it. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's coming to 7:39. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And the UK government is set to launch a drive to stop people wish cycling, which is where unsuitable items are mistakenly placed in green bins.
Yeah, and this comes as it's estimated that 2/3 of our recycling actually ends up in landfill because of errors made when processing our waste containers.
Well, we can ask someone who's now very keen on recycling. This is Dave Clark, also known as Dustbin Dave. Good morning to you, Dustbin Dave. Very good to see you this morning. And I believe you are sat amongst dustbins. That is just brilliant. I am one of these people who is guilty of wish cycling. I think it's where I'm trying to be good and trying to be, you know, a good recycler. I just throw it all in the green bin if it looks as though it could be. But that might not be the best thing, could it be, Dave?
Well, morning GB News and morning The Nation. Well, yes, with recycling, it's a big subject now, and I'm going to give a little example of what we do at home. And anyone can do this. We have, obviously, our main recycling bin outside, and inside we collect these items. So, for instance, you might have a packet, like a flour packet, and on the back it will say recycling. So that means that will go in your main recycling bin outside, which the council collects. So we save them to put in the main bin outside. And then we have, in my fab bin here, I'll just quickly show you that one. We have our own little home recycling system. Now, in here, now this is where it can get confusing. We've got soft plastics in here. Now, on every label, it says on the back. Now, on here, I'll try and show it up to the camera. It says, recycle at supermarket. Don't recycle at home. Now, there is small lettering. It's very hard to see. So, it's a good thing just to look at your packaging. And basically, all these are similar. They all say the same. Recycle at supermarkets. Don't recycle at home. And we keep them for the local supermarket once a week. And then under here we have cans and bottles, which you can put in your home recycling bin outside. But with these, we take them to my local bottle bank at Caister Plainfield, and it goes to that charity to help maintain their facilities. So we keep those in there. Recycling in general it can be confusing, but you can go through every item and see what needs recycling.
Dave, you are fabulous. You've got a whole operation going on there.
Yes, it is an operation. Obviously, we like to help recycling. We like to help the environment to reduce what goes into landfill. And it helps the local community with the cans and the bottles, just taking them to the bottle skip down the road, which goes to the local charity instead of putting them in our recycling bin. And obviously, it varies from area to area what you can put in your recycling bin. Varies what councils can allow you to put in. In ours, it's the basics: paper, cardboard, plastics, cans, bottles, etc. But in your area, they might have different rules. It might be different items you can put in your recycling bin. But everyone can do their little bit by just checking on the back of packaging, cans, bottles, and it normally tells you where you can recycle or how you can recycle.
Does anybody else find this strangely hypnotic?
Yeah.
I'm actually like really hypnotised by rubbish.
Yeah.
It's like really interesting. So Dave Clark, 5 out of 5. Dave Clark, 5. You're an absolute font of knowledge. What about, this is a thorny topic, and one I fall out my missus a lot. She washes everything out endless, like peanut butter jars. If you spent as long cleaning the windows as she cleaned a peanut butter jar, I'd be happy. Do you have to wash all your stuff out, or can you just chuck it in and it gets washed at the end?
Well, I'll tell you what, my wife is an expert on that. She's really into recycling as well. She is the one who basically has cleaned all of these, all of this packaging, and she washes all of these out, all these tubs, washes them all out, all the tins and everything, to go into our recycling bin outside. So, yes, and of course, it's not just paper, plastics, cans, bottles. It can be batteries as well. Now, you're going to like this one. I've got this, which I keep batteries in. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera.
Yeah, I can see, yeah.
Keep all batteries, and various supermarkets, shops, down your local recycling centre or tip have special bins for batteries, what you can put your batteries in. So we keep batteries as well. Everyone at home can keep their batteries instead of putting them in your normal bin to go out with your general waste, which will end up in landfill. If you can save them and find a local place that have the battery bins, then that's good. And of course your mobile phones as well. Instead of putting them in the bin, you can take them to various places if you're not sure where to take them. With the internet now, whether it's good or bad, we can find out anything. So you can find out where to take your mobile phones, where to take your batteries. There's a wealth of information out there about recycling if anyone is unsure. The only thing I wasn't too keen on with these, with the recycling, the lettering. It's so small. It's really tiny. It says, don't recycle at home. You take it to the store. It's tiny, and people will easily miss that. I think it would be good if the manufacturers of these products just make it a little bit bigger. I mean, I do wear glasses for reading, and I would have to wear them. I would have to put them on this morning to actually read that properly. A lot of people probably don't realise these messages are on these packets. So if they can be made bigger, people can see them. I think help with recycling in general and get people aware of what to put in what bin.
Oh, well, Dave, you're a superstar. I think that might be our favourite interview of the day so far. Just before we let you go, just very briefly, what's your favourite bin, I must ask?
Well, this was kindly donated to me by the makers of this bin, and this was the first bin that I ever photographed. So I would say this bin is my favourite purely because it started off my bin hobby with photographing them, but I love all variety of bins. And there's so many out there. And also, a lovely sight for me is driving down the street and seeing everyone's green or black bins, all nicely positioned, all waiting for collection. Yeah. And I love the council badges, not just your general wheelie bin. It's just...
Dave Clark.
Of a subject.
Dave Clark, Dustbin Dave, you are one of a kind. I can honestly say you're still going. Look.
We've got a dustbin T-shirt.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I can
Dave.
honestly say I've never met anybody in my entire life with such a passion for bins. Dustbin Dave Clark, one of a kind, true legend. Thank you. I was totally hypnotised by that.
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, we've had two newspaper reviewers sitting here. Kevin, you looked like your eyes were glazing over.
No, they weren't at all.
It was the opposite.
I was fascinated.
He was absolutely
fascinated. My wife rolls her eyes at home at my recycling, but I mean, Dave would just tip her over the edge.
Has she, clearly?
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, he's put me to shame.
Yeah. Do you enjoy recycling?
I do actually enjoy recycling. Not quite maybe to the level of Dave.
I don't think anybody does.
No, he's sort of elite level recycling.
Yeah. And of course, Emma Wolf, you've been sat at the end. Were you captivated by Dustbin
I was
Dave?
completely captivated. I love all his different bins. I do worry that things that you look on the side... I looked on the side of a plastic yoghurt pot and it just said, cannot be recycled. And you think, well, what? What then? Didn't say take to the supermarket, didn't, you know? So, I think we have a long way to go with our rubbish in this country.
Yeah, I think you're right. Kevin, let's look at some newspapers now and some of the stories inside the pages. But this one's not actually, this is the front page of the Telegraph. So working from home will permanently depress house prices by 10%.
Yeah, I mean, so this story's been presented by the Telegraph as a bad thing.
I'd say it's a good thing, surely.
But yeah, I think if you're somebody who can't go on the housing ladder, if you're, your landlord is hiking the rent up by a massive amount, then anything that makes buying a house more affordable is probably a good thing. Now, the reason they say this is happening, this is a chief economist, or leading economist rather, from the Office for Budget Responsibility, saying basically working from home means that more people will live away from city centres.
Right.
So that will depress demand in city centres, which will bring down house prices there, which will then cause the overall average to come down. So I think the suggestion is that it's not really necessarily going to bring down house prices out with city centres. But as I say, I think anything that brings down house prices, and I say that as someone who does have lucky to have his own home, I think is a good thing, because I think we need to get more people on the property ladder.
Emma, let's have a look at the Times, shall we? The front page, the vanishing princes.
Yeah, so this is this portrait which lots of people, I think, know.
Do you want to hold it up for us?
Yeah, so...
You can see that.
Yeah. It was in the National Portrait Gallery. It was painted in 2010, and it's not going to be displayed. They've had a huge revamp, a £35 million revamp, and a grand reopening, for which I have not been invited, a grand reopening of the National Portrait Gallery happening this month. Obviously, as we know from the coronation and months of strife before that, there wasn't much love lost between William and Harry. There isn't much love lost between them at the moment. And now that this portrait, they're pictured in their their blues and their royals uniforms. Much happier times, obviously, 2010, so they would have been, a fair bit younger. And, it's not going to be included in the rehang. They're saying, the royal family is saying that it wasn't sort of an edict from Kensington Palace or anything like that, that it was just decided not to be included in the rehang. It does seem odd after all the royal frenzy that we've had in recent months, but
I look at that actually, and I see a sort of picture of a happier time.
Yeah, it makes me feel quite sad, actually.
It does.
I mean,
if you have a look at that picture there, you can see it's the princes in
they're looking at each other.
Their pomp. They're very much kind of, you got that one there. They're very much kind of in love with each other, brotherly love. The gaze says it all, and that, I think, is what people want back.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the royal family.
I don't think that uniform's getting much use in Harry's wardrobe at the moment. He's not really allowed to wear his uniform.
But the detail, if you look closely at that, and you can look at it on the GBNews website, they're really intimately looking at each other in a way, I think, that I think many people will feel very reminiscent and sad that it's no longer there.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kevin, let's have a look at the Times, shall we? And groceries ordered on apps, because you can do that now, can't you?
Yeah.
Cost twice as much.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very convenient, and obviously I think during lockdown in particular, these obviously increased in popularity, things like Just Eat, Uber Eats. However, the consumer magazine has done some research, and the difference in price between buying in a supermarket and doing it via an app is absolutely extraordinary. Country Life unsalted butter, for instance, is 45% more expensive if you order it on Amazon. I mean, that is an incredible amount. Bananas, Sainsbury's 85p, Uber Eats £1.75 for the same number. I mean, that is almost £1 more. And if you go to Iceland, basically what they've done is they've got a basket of standard goods. And in Iceland, in the shop, it'd be £36.63, but on Just Eat, it'd be £50.50.
Wow.
So, you're paying through the nose for the convenience. And so it is very convenient. However, at a time when inflation's going up, cost of living crisis, people are looking to keep an eye on the pennies. It might be an idea to actually make the effort to get to the supermarket.
This is insane.
Rather than...
It's one thing doing your online delivery order, but and ordering it from the supermarket and getting it delivered. But the people, I mean, I see them around where I live in London. people getting, like, burgers just delivered. Like, they're paying £20, £30 or whatever for a burger or fries, whatever, some bananas, a few bits and bobs from just groceries. Mm-hmm. You're paying a huge amount. You're paying so much more than you would in the supermarket or even ordering, through the actual
without even realising it,
delivery.
really. And you're not comparing it in front of each other. That's fine. I'll just
of course, it's convenient.
People expect a delivery charge. Yeah. But I don't think what you expect is for each individual product to be wrapped up in terms of the price. That's what I'm really shocked about.
Yeah. It says here that the Just Eat £50.50 compared to Iceland £36.63, that is not including the fee for bringing it to your door. So it would be more than that.
Individually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also ordering like a meal out or an Indian or something, ordering a Chinese is one thing. That's a treat and that's an evening thing and you expect that to cost a little bit more. But to order, individual groceries in that way does seem a real, luxury or an indulgence or a waste of money.
Another story around food, Emma, coming to one of yours here from the Daily Mail. Children's airline food that's packed with up to 3 days' worth of sugar.
Yeah, well, actually, it says that with fuelling Britain's child obesity epidemic, I think you'd have to fly quite a lot for your child to get obese from their meals. But no, these airline meals, it's an absolute shocker. Parents have obviously very little choice. If you're on a long-haul flight, certainly, you don't have much choice except to feed your children unless you pack individual food. And some of these meals that the big airlines are providing can contain up to around 16 teaspoons of sugar. That's around 2 days' worth of sugar for a child. Things like mini cheddars, fruit paws, dairy milk. This is in one box. Dairy milk bar, jammy Dodgers, and a box of raisins. If you've ever had a child who's a little bit high on sugar, you know that that's not a good idea. To have a child, to have lots of children high on sugar in an aircraft.
Oh, been there, got the T-shirt.
Confined space.
In a confined space on a long-haul flight sounds like a terrible idea, both from a kind of mental health perspective as well as their own health.
Yes,
mental health of the parents, usually, when we're frazzled. That's why I turn to the G&T. I think we have to call it a day there. Emma Wolf, thanks for sitting patiently through Dustbin Day, but I know you loved it. And Karen Schofield.
Loved it.
Thanks for joining us again this morning. See you again soon.
Thank you. Now, up next, it's a Manchester derby at the FA Cup final, but it's a red card on the rails as the trains are on strike. We're going to be taking you through that in the next segment. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest forecast. I'm Mark Wilson. Now, after a fine, dry, settled week of weather across the country, it's more of the same through this weekend. Staying settled, lots of sunshine to come, but at times there will be some low clouds towards the east. Why is it so settled at the moment? It's all thanks to this area of high pressure. It really hasn't moved very far at all through the week, and it's going to stay through this coming weekend. So that's what's bringing all the dry weather, but also some cloud towards the east, which I'll just talk about a bit later on. So here's the picture for the first thing on Saturday morning. A fine start to the day for the vast majority. Lots of sunshine. Any cloud will tend to lift and break through the morning, but just a couple of exceptions to the rule. Across the very far north of Scotland here, there'll be thicker cloud, even the odd spot of rain possible, and slightly patchier cloud at times across some southeastern parts. But as I said, for the vast majority, a fine day to come. And in that sunshine, feeling warm as well. Afternoon highs of 21 to 23 degrees for many central and western parts, so warmer than on Friday. Temperatures still a bit cooler, though, towards that North Sea coast. Now, through the rest of Saturday into the evening and overnight, it's more of the same. It stays dry across the board. Lengthy clear skies, one or two mist and fog patches. But through the night, we'll start to see some lower clouds spreading in across eastern Scotland into eastern and central parts of England as well, as that cloud moves westwards through the night. Here it won't be quite so cool, but further towards the west, another chilly night to come. Temperatures widely falling into single figures. Colder than that in some rural spots. So we get off to a bit of an east-west start to the day on Sunday morning. Quite cloudy across some central and eastern parts. Sunnier from the word go across the west. But through the day, much of that cloud will lift and break. So once again, by the time we get through to the late morning, early afternoon, another fine picture across the board. Lots of sunshine to come. Just a bit more cloud across the very far north, with the odd spot of rain across Orkney and Shetland, and more cloud down that North Sea coast. But again, in that sunshine, another warm day to come, 21 to 23 degrees. And it stays fine, dry and settled for most areas into the early part of next week. High pressure still dominating, so lots more sunshine to come. And in that sunshine, once again, it will be pleasantly warm with highs up to the low 20s. I'll see you soon.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 3rd of June. Today,
Travelling by train, well, think again, because train services are due to be crippled once again today as another strike hits the rail network. Tens of thousands of Mancunians will be travelling south to the FA Cup final, but fortunately for Man United, lots of their fans are already there because they're Cockney Reds.
not all of them, Martin.
It's just an old joke.
A second complaint has been brought against Swansea MP Geraint Davies as he remains suspended from the Labour Party pending an investigation into sexual misconduct. Does Westminster have a sex pest problem?
And do you know what to put in your recycling bins? The government is set to launch a drive to stop people putting the wrong types of items in their recycling. Items like plastic bags and toothpaste tubes cannot be processed in recycling centres.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
It's been a dry week of weather across the UK through this week, but is the fine and sunny weather going to continue across the country through this weekend? Find out all the details with me here on GB News.
So top of the morning to you. I'm Martin Daubney.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. those of you getting in touch with us this morning. On the front cover of the Daily Star today, 13% of Brits put tea and coffee on their cornflakes in the morning. So we were asking you, first of all, do you do that? And second of all, any other weird flavour combinations that you want to share with us today? Cheryl has put a new twist on things, saying Christmas breakfast is Baileys poured on cornflakes. Now that I can get on board with.
Yeah.
It's milky.
Yeah, that's not
I get that.
anywhere near as mad as some of the frank madness we've had this morning. Now, there's
there's been
one fella
madness.
saying sardines and marmalade on Weetabix. Clive is saying it. My wife eats banana and onion sandwiches. Maybe that's to keep you awake, Clive.
John, I think John is winding us up. Weetabix with avocado and tinned pink salmon on top. No, surely not.
I mean, that's basically just mixing every sort of wrong level. I mean, that's basically lunch, dinner, breakfast on one plate.
The only thing I would say about that is Weetabix is almost a bit like like a cracker, like one of those thick crackers. You can get dense kind of... You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So almost like a lunch cracker, thin.
You're starting to warm to these ideas.
No, I can understand where we're going with that one. Judy from Durham says, I love raw onion and I love honey, but my husband put them together in a sandwich to cure his cold. I thought he'd lost the plot, but it really worked.
Well,
raw onion and honey sandwich.
Barry from Portsmouth, I think, has lost the plot. No offence, Barry. I mean that in the nicest possible sense. But listen to this, Els. My favourite breakfast is Manx kipper, so far so good, with custard.
No.
Custard and kippers. Barry, have you been drinking something?
Yeah, and I think Mel's probably correct here. Mel's been in touch saying, surely some viewers are taking the mickey. Yeah, I think the same, Mel. Coffee on Weetabix, yuck. And again, I don't think that's that crazy because coffee on Weetabix is a bit like a mocha, you know?
Yeah,
especially on chocolate Weetabix. I can understand coffee on Weetabix. Coffee on cornflakes, not so much.
Now, I understand that people living abroad miss British flavours. One of them's got to be Terry, watching in Spain. I have Marmite on my porridge.
Ooh. I think Stephen does that, Stephen Dixon, actually.
Marmite on porridge.
He's mentioned that one before. Do keep those views coming in. It's making us laugh this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, the FA Cup final goes ahead today as 90,000 fans will be heading to Wembley Stadium.
Yeah, but this weekend's rail strikes will have a major effect on Manchester United and City supporters travelling down from the north of England.
Well, let's speak now to our reporter, Jack Carson, who's at Warwick Service Station. And, Jack, good morning to you. We can see lots of movement behind you there. This has caused a lot of disruption for football fans on what is such a big day in sport.
Yeah, of course, this is the second, of course, train strike this week when the ASLEF Drivers' Union got on strike. And so lots of fans have had to take those alternative ways of travelling down, of course, a lot of them taking a coach. Around just after 9 o'clock, we're expecting to get the first set of Man United coaches here at Warwick Service Station. The two clubs have been each kind of given a service station to stop at if they're going down on a coach. And, of course, fans advised which kind of route to take. United fans kind of advised to take the M40, which is where we are now at Warwick Services. Manchester City fans, of course, down on the M1 down to London, both a similar distance, but of course when you're travelling down by car this early in the morning, it's all still very light-hearted here. As you can see behind me, it's all kind of kicking off. We've got some bucket hats for sale, we've got some scarves all here for the Man United fans that might be coming off and stopping at this service station. But as I mentioned, it's all very much light-hearted and possibly going a little bit behind enemy lines. We've got Steve, the Manchester City fan, who's here at Warwick Services. How are you feeling ahead of today's game?
Feeling fine, looking forward to it, with it being the first ever Manchester Derby at Wembley. Yeah, it's going to be a really good day for both fans, really.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about the story of you becoming a Man City fan. How long's your association with the club been?
I started when I was 5 years of age. I'm now 66 years of age. One of my uncles took me to the first match at Main Road, the old Main Road, which I really enjoyed and followed him ever since.
And what do you reckon's going to happen in the game today? What's your prediction?
I've gone for 3-0. 3-0 to Manchester City.
There we go, an absolute thrashing. Steve, thank you very much for joining us here on GB News this morning. And as you say, fans are travelling down to Wembley today. When you get down to Wembley, it's going to be a huge police operation, more than 1,000 Met police officers, also as well officers from Greater Manchester Police mixing in with those crowds, making sure everyone has a safe and enjoyable day.
Jack Gosson, thank you for that report. You should really put a scarf on, mate. Maybe one of each might be the safest option. Don't choose a side so early in the day. Jack Gosson, thank you for that fantastic report. Is it great to see that entrepreneurial Del Boy spirit? They're selling scarves in a service station.
True.
You've got to love that sort of, that Del Boy attitude. Well, back in the studio, we're joined by the perfumed, the excellent Aidan McGee. Aidan, so let's quickly talk about this final before we move. Of course, there is another game of football today, the Scottish Cup final, but first the FA Cup final.
Yeah, history's at stake here. Manchester United are the only team to won the treble. They can stop Manchester United from doing that. Sorry, they can stop Manchester City from doing that today. Obviously, it doesn't stop. They can still win the Champions League next week on June the 10th. They face off against Inter Milan. But United will be saving their history today. And they've got the players to cause an upset. I think they played at Old Trafford back in February, and United prevailed that day. Eric Ten Hag seems to have a way of playing against Manchester City, which has been successful in the past, notwithstanding a 6-3 defeat at the Etihad back in September. But look, there's no need for a team talk today. They're saving their legacy. They did it in 99. They're the only clubs to have done it. They stopped Liverpool doing it back in 77, that great United team with the Greenhoff brothers and Lou Macari, Steve Coppell, Alex Stepney, etc. So, as I say, there's no need for a team talk today. In fact, if they win it, that means they've won both domestic trophies.
In terms of who's going to win, the bookies it's looking like easy for Man City, but Man U 6-1. That's too big a price. I've got a little nibble on United.
They've played for it relatively recently, and United were fairly comfortable in that game. So I wouldn't write them off in a two-horse race. Certainly not. It's the first time they've faced off together in the FA Cup final. Manchester City have dropped their regular goalkeeper because they prefer Stefan Ortega for the cup games, so that's a weakness they can go on. He's not really been tested in the league games that he's played so far, and in fact he's not really been tested in the cup games either. So that's something that United might home in on. And United have got match winners. Marcus Rashford's had a brilliant season. Fernandes has had a fantastic season as well. They've got serial winners, Casemiro, Varane, players like that. So don't write them off, certainly not in a two-horse race.
OK, we need to head north of the border, of course, in the interest of balance. Scottish Cup final today, Hampden Park, Celtic versus Inverness, and another treble on the line up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this one was the one they didn't win last season. Celtic, they won 2 trophies in Ange Postecoglou's first season. They didn't win the Scottish Cup. Rangers denied them, I think, in about the quarterfinals or semi-final, something like that. So they can make it a treble this year. It's not. I mean, the treble up there is a domestic treble. It's been done relatively recently. Brendan Rodgers did it with Celtic. I think Rangers have done it recently as well. Now the subplot is that I expect Celtic to win today, but the subplot is that their manager, they're a very highly respected manager, Ange Postecoglou, who joined the club when they were in disarray 2 years ago, and really turned it around quite quickly, having brought in some really good Japanese talent. He's Greek, but he's Australian, and he's a huge personality. He's 57 years old, and Tottenham really fancy him. And I think they're going to make an approach for Ange Postecoglou after the game. I can't recall a time when a top 6 club in England has gone after an old firm manager in the recent past. We saw Brendan Rodgers go to Leicester back in 2019, but this is a top 6 club going for them. I think they really fancy him.
Could be a bittersweet moment then if Celtic lift the trophy, then they lose their gaffer.
Yeah, exactly. Look, when they lost Brendan Rodgers, after winning 9 titles in a row, that was the line in the sand. When they lost Rodgers, Neil Lennon came back in, having been in charge 10 years earlier, and they lost the chance to usurp Rangers and Celtic. Well, the record held jointly by both clubs, which is winning 9 titles in a row. It really disrupted them. That, as I say, they're in a real state of disrepair off the pitch and in the boardroom and on the pitch as well. And Postecoglou went in there and sorted it out big time, quickly. And I think Tottenham fancy the idea of getting him in there. Big personality, bring the team together, bring the squad together, bring the club together, because, as I say, Tottenham are in a mess at the moment. They haven't got a manager. Other clubs are signing players, and they need to make an appointment quickly.
Aidan, big day of sport today. Got to talk about the Epsom Derby, and there could be potential disruption from animal rights protesters.
Yeah, animal uprising. There have been injunctions obtained to try and limit their effectiveness, but they said they're going to break the law. They've said that repeatedly in recent days. Their justification is that in the interest of the animals, they're justified in doing that. It's a huge logistical problem trying to man a track, trying to stop people getting onto the field of play, as it were. But it'd be nice to talk about the racing, at some point. Every time we go into a big meeting, Ellie, we did it with the National, didn't we, a short time ago, a few weeks back. We were talking about protests. I do think, as I've said before, you need to marginalise them to some degree and stop making them a story every single time, because that oxygen of publicity gives them the incentive to keep doing it again and again and again. And when they've achieved that level of notoriety and that effectiveness in protest in something like horse racing, how long before we see it? I don't rule out seeing it at the FA Cup final today.
OK, with that in mind, what about the GGs? Who do you fancy?
Well, a huge day for Frankie Dettori, 52 years old. His last race, he's on Arrest, who's the favourite today, trained by John and Thady Gosden. That's underway from 1:30. It's been brought forward a little bit just to accommodate the FA Cup final, of course, as we mentioned, which of course is 3 o'clock today. And so, look, it'd be great to get that kind of story or another story, an outlier. But yeah, I think I don't know what the actual numbers are in terms of where he is in being the favourite. But
I think he is the favourite. I think he's at 4.3. Well, I got a tenner on this morning.
Have you?
29 years he's been in the saddle. His first ever race was at Epsom.
Right. Okay.
And this could be, I think, a romantic Hollywood ending.
Yeah. Well, look, he's a stellar competitor, isn't he? Somebody who goes right back to my childhood, even though he doesn't look old enough to have done that. But yeah, I mean, look, it'd be great to see him. As I say, I'd love to see him in the saddle today, celebrating. I'd love to be talking about the calibre of the race and what happened in the sport on the field of play. That'd be important to me. And important to everyone too.
Trying to spoil it.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. All right, Aidan McGee, always a pleasure. Never a chore.
Food. A friend of mine said he has Pringles Primulus bread. Do you remember that in the 80s?
I think that's right.
Yeah, a little class in the 80s, wasn't it? Like Philadelphia type stuff.
I love Primula.
With prawns layered on a sandwich. He has it for every birthday and Christmas. His mum makes it for him. Steve Baker, his name is, one of our producers.
Well, there we go.
Oh, wow.
That's what you call motherly love.
Not sure about that either. All right. Thank you very much, Aidan, for bringing us that update.
Cheers, mate.
Now, we're bringing the rest of today's headlines. At least 288 people have been killed and 850 people have been injured after 2 passenger trains collided in India, making it the country's deadliest rail accident in more than a decade. The Coromandel Express, which runs from Kolkata to Chennai, crashed into the Howrah Superfast Express in the eastern state of Odisha. The army has been deployed to help with evacuating the injured.
And diesel prices fell by a record of almost 12 pence last month, the biggest drop in 1 month for over 2 decades. The RAC says the average price of diesel dropped from 158.9 pence to 147 pence in May, the 7th consecutive month in which UK pump prices were finally reduced. This means the cost of filling up a typical family car has fallen by £6.50.
President Zelensky says Ukraine is ready to launch its counteroffensive against Russia. Speaking to the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Zelensky said he believes his country will succeed in recapturing Russian-occupied territory, but does not know how long it will take. Kyiv previously said it needed more Western armoured vehicles before the fight back could begin.
OK, bit of politics now. A second complaint has been levelled against Swansea MP Geraint Davis as he remains suspended from the Labour Party pending an investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct.
Well, Westminster is no newcomer when it comes to a sex problem, with new MPs often warned to stay away from dozens of dodgy colleagues.
And we're joined now by writer and political commentator David Oldroyd Bolt. David, thanks for joining us this morning. So, a familiar topic of Westminster, but concerning reports about, Eddie was saying earlier, MPs handing lists of known kind of creeps, if you like, out to new recruits. How big a problem is this, and how robust is the system in place to tackle it?
Well, we know it's been a long-standing problem. The website Guido Fawkes has for many years had these lists which are circulated by parliamentary staff to each other and also to the website saying, you know, these are the MPs to watch out for, this is what their proclivities are. And it's a huge list, absolutely huge. And of course, the names are redacted, but the, as it were, offences are listed. I think one of the big problems with Westminster as a working environment is that it has not kept pace with the change in expectations of culture and of practices. It's a highly alcoholic environment. The working hours are long. The systems in which they work are close and pressured. And I think, therefore, the potential for incidents of this nature is much greater than it would be in the normal, everyday job. And the stakes are much higher. So, of course, people seek an outlet for their tensions. That usually means, I think, a lot more drinking than would be acceptable in any other sort of workplace. And so perhaps the risk is far greater. The procedures, of course, are catching up with this because it is the expectation of the modern workplace, and quite rightly so, that people should not be subject to sexual harassment at work. How robust they are remains to be seen, because we see that there are many cases, as it were, on the books of investigations continuing. I think it's important that there is a procedure of due process Mr. Davies has not been found guilty of anything.
Yep.
These offences are alleged, and until that point, he is innocent. And I think in every single instance that must be the case, that people are, until proved guilty whether by court or by internal investigation, considered to be innocent. So let's bear that in mind.
Yes. Stella Creasy, the Labour MP, is calling for action on this. She says that so often this behaviour is so widely known, but so little action is taken. She's calling for parties to look at their complaints processes and make it easier for people to raise their concerns. Is that something that you would welcome?
Well, I have no idea how difficult or easy it is at the moment. It's very difficult to tell from an external position what the internal procedures of a party or an organisation are. I should have thought it's probably quite easy. If you have a complaint, you take it to whether it's the chief whip, if we're working within Parliament, or if you're in the central party office, you take it to the head of HR, which of course they all have now because it's a modern workplace. Where the difficulties arise is, I think, if the person against whom the complaint is being raised is of a particularly high profile, because then there will be pressure, of course, not to embarrass that person or the party more widely. Now, in that instance, perhaps it would be necessary for Parliament to have a disinterested body and a full parliamentary, as it were, body to which you could go. The problem here is that there is no HR department within Parliament. Each MP is directly responsible for employing his or her staff. There is no sort of central system through which they all go. If that were to be the case, I think there would be problems, because it is important with such a close working relationship that MPs have control over their staffing. However, there should be an extra staffed body to which people could go with complaints so that they knew that they would be taken seriously.
But David, if there is a list, which is widely disseminated, of dodgy characters, they're still in power, they're still in their seat. Charlotte Nicholas, MP for Labour, is saying that there's somebody on the opposition front bench who she's reported to the police who's still in position. Is it not just the fact this is widespread, but there seems a reluctance to actually kick people out because of it?
Well, perhaps that is the case. Perhaps also it's the case that there is a culture here which says that you should not bring things to light, as we said, to embarrass people. And perhaps also it's the case that too many of these are just rumours and innuendos with no substance to them. And let's not forget that politics is a rather dirty game and that people will use any weapon in their armoury in order to gain advancement.
OK, let's take a look at the Boris Johnson WhatsApp Cabinet Office public inquiry saga that's been running over the past few days. So the latest is quite an extraordinary move, really, where Boris Johnson has handed his phone over to the independent inquiry itself. He's bypassed Cabinet in order to do so. What do you make of Boris Johnson and the way that he is handling this situation?
I think it's one of the better acts in his public career of late, because there is an important principle here that the workings of government should be transparent. And the Public Records Act of 1958 requires all decisions and all communication which leads to a decision of policy to be a matter of public record. Now, of course, you can say, well, that was never really the case, because what about phone calls between ministers in the pre-email and pre-WhatsApp days? Not every communication can be monitored. However, when WhatsApp becomes, as has been very clear throughout the pandemic and since, the primary means of communication between ministers, advisors, civil servants, then I think there is really a need for that Act to be updated to include these types of communications. And the complaint of privacy or invasion of privacy is one we should take seriously. However, these are monumental decisions that were taken affecting the health, livelihoods of the entire nation, often taken at a really great pace with limited advice and very little parliamentary scrutiny. So I think for Mr Johnson to give these over is right. For him to do it without the Cabinet Office's approval is just another, as it were, notch on the bedpost in the long saga of Boris Johnson versus the Cabinet Office.
And is there gravity in the idea that Boris was actually quite open, quite libertarian? He was quite critical of the more severe lockdown processes that were put in place, criticised for that heavily at the time. But with the benefit of hindsight, I wonder if he's more likely to be putting his information forward voluntarily Because he may have been proven right.
Well, yes, he wants to vindicate himself retrospectively, that's without question. And we know that Boris Johnson's libertarian instincts were greater than those of, say, Matt Hancock and Michael Gove. This was clear through the Matt Hancock messages that Isabel Oakeshott released, and this was clear at the time. There were reports at the time that Johnson was much more inclined to restrain the use of government power than, say, Mr Gove or Mr Hancock. And, again, politics is a pretty hard game, and he's going to want to set himself up for a potential return to power or leadership by saying, look, I was there throughout this. I was restrained by other cabinet colleagues from keeping you free or setting you free after lockdowns. Trust me, I can do this again.
Well, David Oldroyd-Bolt, that was a fantastic analysis. Thanks for coming this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
OK, moving on now.
Yeah, do stay with us because we've got lots more to come, including Stephanie Tecci has all of the showbiz stories that you need to know about today. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:25. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
Yes, good morning to you. And Caroline Flack's mum says ITV has learnt nothing from the death of her daughter.
Yeah, Christine Flack gave an interview to Newsnight on BBC and said ITV treats presenters like commodities and that she's worried for Philip Schofield.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by Stephanie Tecci. Steph, you've watched this interview with Christine Flack. I'm sure it was very, very emotional viewing. What are your main takeaways from it?
I think Christine Flack has raised the alarm now about that duty of concern for Philip Schofield following his bombshell interview with BBC and The Sun, where he clearly looks like a broken man who is dealing with the fallout of him stepping from ITV and now this big scandal that's erupted about his younger lover who worked at This Morning. And what Christine Flack is saying is that ITV is like history repeating itself, and ITV is not doing that duty of care for Philip Schofield. They've kind of just left him to it. He had a 40-year glittering career with them before this scandal erupted. But Christine Flack, more than anyone, she's lost her daughter who ended her own life, and she doesn't want to see that with Philip Schofield. So we have a clip here of her on Newsnight.
It worries me because it's relentless on him. I feel, I do feel worried for him. He knew Caroline, and I must say when she died, he was very upset. And I think he's now realising even more what she went through.
ITV, of course, have responded and they've said the relationships we have with those we work with are based on trust. Philip made assurance to us and his agency, which he now acknowledges were untrue, and we feel badly let down. As a producer and broadcaster, ITV takes its responsibilities around duty of care seriously and has robust and well-established processes in place to support the mental and physical health of employees and all those we work with.
Okay.
It's interesting because initially, when Philip Schofield mentioned Caroline Flack in his interview with BBC, there was quite a backlash from people as to why you bring her into it, and that he's taking a bit of a liberty. But for Christine, Caroline's mother, to come in and support him, he seems to have been vindicated.
He does seem to be vindicated by Caroline's mum, but some of her friends have come out and they're feeling angry that Philip has likened this situation that happened, this unfortunate situation that happened to Caroline, to what he's done. Because for what Philip done, he had a cover-up for many years. Over the space of 3 years, he's been sitting on this scandal, and he knew this day was going to come eventually. Where Caroline, she was thrown into the midst of it. She couldn't handle the pressure, the fact that she was going to be assaulted and that she was going to be taken to court for assaulting her boyfriend. So it's two different situations. And for those of us, including myself, who've lost people to suicide, you can't just throw it out there. It's a very touching situation. I do feel sorry for Philip that his mental anguish has been pushed to the limit, but, have respect for the dead in that sense. And you can't just fling their name out. But ITV do have to look at how they are handling such situations like this in the future.
We do now have that second clip from Christine's interview with Newsnight, where she speaks about the presenter's relationship with ITV. Let's have a little listen to that.
No, they haven't learnt anything. They haven't. They treat them as commodities. And I know it's a lovely job and I know they earn money, but also the television stations that earn money from them. But they're not commodities, they're people, and they're employed. And if my employee didn't take care of me, there'd be all hell to pay.
And there could be hell to pay for ITV next week when they do go to Parliament. We have Dame Caroline McCall, who's going to be facing questions from MPs about the duty of care in this situation with Philip Schofield. And, what is going to be the future kind of stuff that they would have to carry out in such situations. I do feel like it's going to be a defining moment for the media landscape, because after the big furore of this Philip Schofield situation, I don't even think viewers at home want to see something like this again. We have to have stuff in place in the media that make sure that such scandals cannot be hidden for 3 years. They need to be dealt with effectively as soon as an issue has been brought to public attention.
And you're totally right with what you said earlier, where this has become so much bigger than Philip Schofield now. It is about the media landscape, it is about working culture, it's about mental health. It has become much bigger, hasn't it, as a conversation. Let's talk about the Soap Awards, shall we? Because Philip Schofield was meant to be presenting that. Obviously, he's now stepped down from that role, but we have a very special presenter who stepped into his shoes.
Jane McDonald, who I think is a fabulous replacement. She loves soaps. The TV Awards are such a big establishment. The Soap Awards are a very big thing on the TV calendar. And, you know, Philip Schofield was looking forward to still hosting it, but followed his admission of the scandal and the affair. ITV said have obviously parted ways with him. So Jane McDonald, I think she'll do a really good job. She's come out, she said she loves soaps. I do think Philip Schofield's scandal will still be a big talking point tonight, but we will see that on Tuesday and see what's happened from tonight.
Steph, just another quick point on the ITV this morning. Look on the front page of the Daily Mail there. Holly, very much, I'm back in business. She plans to be on the show on Monday morning. She's been out in Portugal plugging hair products on Instagram.
I know.
As if nothing has gone wrong. Is it, in your idea, wise to go back Monday, or should she wait until after that parliamentary probe on Wednesday?
I think she should wait for the storm to clear and then make her return. Because I think by her going back, it's like she's disregarding all of the controversy, all the drama, which in her defence, you know, she clearly has that confidence that the show must go on. But she might receive a backlash from viewers, but she's going to have to address it the first thing as soon as she comes on camera. There's nothing she can sweep underneath the carpet. So
it will be really interesting to see what she says. And we know now who's going to be sat alongside her on the sofa.
Josie Gibson, which I thought was a bit of a wild card for me because a lot of people have saying it's going to be Alison Hammond, but it's not going to be her. I think Josie will be with her for the first 3 shows, and then she'll be joined by Craig McDoyle for the rest of the week. So I think it's going to be a revolving door of presenters. But they've got big shoes to fill, you know, despite people are so used to seeing Holly and Phil. And I don't know how the dynamics are going to be with other presenters on a long-term basis.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what the viewing figures are like.
Because they've been dipping.
And it'll be interesting to see what bosses make of that.
And also the problem now for Holly is that a lot of guests have been pulling out from appearing on This Morning following the scandal. So they may have Holly back in the hot seat, but you've got advertisers who are pulling out and you've got high-profile guests who don't want to be on that show. So there's going to have to be a lot of questions and a lot of thinking time for bosses to think about what's next.
But you might find, for example, like when Gary Lineker was pulled off of Match of the Day, the viewing figures went up.
Yes.
When it was just a match, I think people want to tune in for the novelty factor. So you may well see like a spike of people tuning in to see what the new show is like. But of course, the challenge is, can that be maintained?
It will trail after, and only time will tell what will happen next. But this morning, they're definitely going to have to go through some changes.
Yeah, definitely. Stephanie, thank you so much. Thank you.
Very interesting. OK, more to come, including all the other stories in Saturday's newspapers.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. It's 8:37. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And it's time to go through the papers now. And joining us this morning is political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and writer and columnist Emma Wolfe. Really good to have you both this morning. And Emma, we'll start with some happy news, I think. The temperatures are going to rise across the UK next week.
You've been putting your coat away and taking them out again and putting them away.
Yes, I vacuum packed mine and then had to get them back out.
Vacuum packed it?
Yeah, very organised. Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like this summer is going to be a bit of a fits and starts kind of summer without a proper...
Yeah.
I don't know. So 1st of June, whenever it was, Thursday, Wednesday, it was just cold and grey. This is good news. This is... Apparently, we're going to get some record highs over the coming week. Not a heat wave, but mid-20s by next week. I feel like they keep saying next week, tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be hot.
Well, we were told this weekend, weren't we? And it's cold.
It's just a bit sort of iffy. It's not quite warm
cold
enough.
in the mornings, definitely.
It's cold in the morning.
And then
you put on a big coat and you find yourself in the playground, sweltering in a fleece. Like,
it's impossible to dress, isn't it, at the moment? You just don't know what's going to happen to you.
I mean, a lot of people will be saying hurrah to this. I mean, we're constantly told, global warming is going to be the end of the planet, we're all going to die. But actually... most people are looking forward to a bit of sun on their backs, get out in the garden and have a few beers.
Absolutely, yeah, that's why I chose it, because I think this year has been awful. I think everybody needs a bit of a boost.
Well, let's hope that this is right now, Emma, because we have been told it for as you said, the last few weeks, really been told it's coming.
Really have, yeah.
Hasn't happened yet, though, has it? If it's sunny, people might be getting out to do a spot of gardening, perhaps in their allotment.
Absolutely, good
Like that
allotment.
segue?
Well, that's fantastic. Seamless segue. So as we know, the popularity of growing your own veg sort of grew, pardon the pun, over lockdown, and lots of people put their names down on waiting lists. But if you put your name down on a waiting list at the start of lockdown, you might just now be getting an allotment, because waiting lists have now hit 3 years. It's so popular. But if you live in London, it's 6 years, which is extraordinary. Although there's a place in South Wales, it's only a month. So maybe you want to move there if you're so desperate to grow your own carrots. But yeah, it is an interesting phenomenon now that people are looking to grow their own.
You'd have to be pretty keen to move house to get a quicker allotment.
Maybe a little bit excessive.
And I don't know about you fellas, but I've had a go at growing my own. It's been disastrous. My dad, and my granddad both dug for Britain, that kind of post-war mentality. Brussels sprouts, broad beans, peas, tomatoes, everything. I get these little pots and everything gets killed by slugs. Nothing lives. I'm hopeless at it.
Yeah, well, we're lucky. Our back garden backs onto an allotment, and the guy, one of our neighbours, he's a retired gentleman, has it, and it is immaculate. But during the summer, he is there. It's like a full-time job. He's there like 12 hours a day.
And is he one of those guys that gives you all the excess and comes around with fresh carrots?
A little bit. We've had the odd tomato over the garden fence, but other friends of ours in the same allotment, they're working, and they've just had to pack it in because it's just so much work. It's like a full-time. It's a full-time job, and unless you're willing to put in the hours after work every single night.
It is a bit like, a dog isn't for Christmas.
Totally.
An allotment.
It's a great idea. It sounds great, the good life, grow your own veg, but you actually have to put in the effort, an awful lot of effort. But a lot of people are willing to do it, obviously. Yeah.
Do you grow your own in your garden?
No.
Not for you. Emma?
Not. The only thing I've ever had success with is tomato plants, and they smell so horrible.
They do, don't they?
The plants just reek that I had to throw them out. I couldn't bear it. I just could not bear it. That's the only thing I've ever...
I love the smell of tomato. That to me is my granddad's greenhouse smell. That tomato smell, I think, is fantastic. Love it.
It's the plant, though, isn't it?
It's
I
the
get
plant.
what you mean.
It's not the tomatoes. I love the smell
the
of
plants
tomatoes.
themselves.
I don't know that
Yeah,
at all.
no, not sure about that. The only thing I've managed is basil on the windowsill.
Oh, yeah, but herbs, that's not
Herbs are a
veg.
bit easier.
You buy them in the
You
pot
can just
already
buy
and
them
put
at...
No, you
the
take a little
supermarket.
cutting and then you can
That's good. That's next level.
do that on the windowsill. Yeah, well, I don't have a garden, so it's a bit more challenging.
Bit of a challenge, yeah.
Yeah.
How's this for a segue? King Charles, now he likes talking to plants.
Oh, yeah?
He does. This story, I didn't know the king was in Romania. This story made me genuinely really happy.
Yeah.
He's out in Romania on his own. He's gone for this, hiking holiday of rest and recuperation, a private visit, although he was welcomed by the president and he had a guard of honour and a reception at the Quattrocenti Palace.
Slap-up champagne suppers.
Yeah, absolutely huge mega thing, and gave a massive speech. But anyway, private visit of rest and recuperation. I didn't know he had a holiday home there. I didn't know he owned 10 properties in Romania.
No.
He has really deep connections to the country. He goes there to paint and to hike in the hills. I just didn't know this about Romania.
That's really lovely, isn't it?
I just felt like he was so exhausted after the coronation. And I love the idea of him hiking in the hills after he got rid of the Guard of Honour and all the president and everything. And he said, I have come to love Romania, your culture and art, your heritage and history, your sweeping landscape and priceless biodiversity.
Yeah, I wonder, Kev, how much of this will kind of fuel the kind of Republicans. Here we go, he's got seven chateaux in Britain, now he's got 10 in Romania, this is the empire.
Yeah, possibly. But it's the first thing he's been there in 25 years. Is that what it says? Wow.
Yeah.
Right, OK.
Just rekindled his love affair.
It's a bit weird if you've got a holiday home and you haven't been there for 25 years. But also...
Perhaps rekindled love.
Beg the question. If he's got 10 properties that none of us had heard about in Romania, how many does he have around the world? Does he literally have hundreds?
I can sense a Guardian expose.
Exactly. Some nasty little...
Now, Kev, interesting, we talk a lot about AI, the threat of it. Will it end the world? Will it be helpful? And all the nuance therein. Rishi Sunak's been on a bit of an ambassadorial tour. He wants Britain to be a global watchdog on this. Now, is that likely to happen? Because I'd have thought America would like to do that job.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to America next week, and this is going to be one of the things that he's going to be discussing with President Biden. Obviously, Rishi Sunak is very into his tech and his scientific exploration and advances, and he sees, I think, an opportunity for Britain there to be a global leader in this field. Now, you're right, debate, our opinion is split on AI. It's either going to wipe out the planet or it's going to be a fantastic boon for the world. Now, what Rishi Sunak is suggesting is that, as you say, the UK should London should house an international watchdog, because clearly there is, I think, justifiable concern at the very least about what AI could potentially do. Are we creating a technology which will become far more intelligent than humans, in which case how do you harness that? What regulation do you put in place to try and protect civilization? So, what they're likening it to is the International Atomic Energy Agency, which keeps an eye on nuclear proliferation, and, his idea. But you're right, I think if he was to go to President Biden and say, right, this should be in London, I imagine President Biden might well turn around and say, well, I'd rather it was in Washington.
Yeah,
Thanks
we've got
very
this thing
much.
called Silicon Valley. We might want to do it there, but isn't it fascinating about AI, not just the kind of more nefarious, North Korea, Russia, war games, but also just the operational level about which jobs would be replaced? Because I think automation, working class jobs kind of going because of AI, that I think is the thing that more people are bothered about. Will I be replaced?
I think that's a huge issue, and I don't feel like we've ever had a say in that. We've never had a say. I mean, we've had all the tech bosses recently coming out saying, by the way, I created AI, but it's kind of out of control. We know that all the Silicon Valley guys, they don't let their kids have any kind of digital devices. So there's a lot of kind of uncertainty around this. But Martin, as you say, it's the jobs, it's the kind of how this is going to impact people's lives. You can't get through on a phone line nowadays, let alone, when everything is run by the bots. So,
And I think the other concern is regulation. I mean, if you look at the way that passing our laws works, at least, I mean, to even come up with new legislation is so laborious and so time-consuming. I mean, it would take several months, and then by that point,
utterly failed to regulate the internet in any way. We've always had this buck passing of, well, it's not our fault. We can't crack down on this and that online. So how is it going to work with AI?
Well, is it going to be the same thing?
They're always trying to play catch-up as well, aren't they? With the internet, it's always seems like we're one step behind in terms of cracking down on trolls, that type of thing. Whereas with AI, maybe we can try to get ahead of it, but I think it's going to be quite difficult.
I think fair play to Rishi as well on this is that most MPs, can probably barely, we know they can use WhatsApp, some of them, but most MPs are pretty tech illiterate, you'd say, just into the fact that a lot of them are kind of a bit older. So at least we've got somebody getting on a front foot, getting into this space with business acumen, trying to get Britain at the forefront of it. So at least there's effort there.
Yeah, well, there needs to be a political debate on it, because I don't remember it ever being debated in Parliament really to any great extent. Certainly the last election, I don't remember AI probably wasn't even a thing, and that was only 2019, So we need to know where the parties are on it, what their proposals are for trying to harness this for good, but also making sure that you can neutralise any potential dangers there are as well.
I actually would like to see AI politicians. I would. Do you know why? Because if
you wouldn't.
I would, because if they made decisions based on logic and facts and not emotions, for example, we might not be harnessed down to net zero targets. We might say, let's have our own shale because that would make economic sense. Let's stop importing things. A logical-based decision.
He's on his hobby horse.
Sorry.
I just think...
What do you think they would have said about Brexit, Martin?
They just said it's great for sovereignty and we should go ahead with it, I assume. Then, of course, a different bot might have just looked at the pure economics and drawn a different conclusion. That's where we do need human nuance. But I think, logic and facts are the way forward. Maybe AI has got an important role to play in politics and referendum and votes.
Well, perhaps, but we just don't know that. That's the problem, isn't it? We just don't know whether it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. The chances are it'll be somewhere in between, as these things always are. But I think I'd rather have it regulated just to make sure.
Yeah, and perhaps we can take comfort in the fact that Rishi Sunak wants to be on the forefront of this as well. We've got time for one more story, quite a brief one with you here, Kevin. This is the IRA plot to kill the Queen may have been dreamt up by a San Francisco pub prankster.
This is I'd love to see a film made of this story. It is absolutely incredible. So these are FBI files, which after 40 years have finally been revealed. So in 1983, the Queen visited America, and there was a alleged plot to try and kill her. But what made them think actually this could just be a total prank, kind of barroom bravado talk, was that the idea was that the Royal Britannia would be going under the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and someone would drop something from the bridge on the boat, and that would kill her. But obviously, it passed off that incident. It didn't happen. But there's far too much detail in here to do it justice. I would definitely recommend you reading it. But it's all about IRA sympathisers in Irish pubs sort of talking, and there were British spies in there sort of eavesdropping on the conversations, and this is where it all came from. So obviously it had to be taken seriously, because obviously threat to the Queen's life. However, there's a suspicion that it was so half-cocked, really, that it was probably just drunken bravado. But it's a remarkable story.
Remarkable now that these things, can be read and can be seen. It's remarkable, really, the threat that could have been posed to Her Majesty. And thank goodness it wasn't, Emma.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It's sort of remarkable the things that are coming out now as sort of files are released and things like that. But just think about the millions, the billions that were spent on, security and security around the royal family, the coronation and the police presence and all of that. There's just such a such a threat to them, you know, flying.
Especially at that time, it was during the
anywhere.
Troubles as well, the height of the Troubles,
Exactly.
1983.
Yeah, and everything that the British monarchy
time.
stood for at the time, yes, of course. Emma, Kevin, it's been great to see you both this morning. Thank you so much for your company.
Super, great. And I'm glad you enjoyed Dustbin Dave as well, didn't we all? Moving swiftly onwards now. The government has come under pressure from all sides over its anti-protest laws. Some say they are too draconian, whilst others argue they have not given the police enough direction to stop disruption.
Well, now the government is seeking to toughen them up. Our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, has the latest.
Oh, my... This is absolute mayhem. Absolute mayhem. People are so close to being run over. This is incredibly dangerous. There is no police presence at the moment.
Blocking roads, gluing themselves to the floor, and throwing paint on historic buildings and works of art. Extreme protest groups like Just Stop Oil have been increasingly disruptive in their methods, highlighting their cause through deliberate causation of chaos. And politicians have been attempting to crack down on these groups for some time.
No, you can't just start a riot or glue yourself to the roads and get away with it.
The government's Public Order Act tried to give the police new powers to immediately crack down on protests that cause, quote, serious disruption to the life of a community. But the government's plans were watered down by the House of Lords. Now the government wants to overrule the Lords using a nifty mechanism sometimes referred to as Henry VIII powers that can change law without the consent of Parliament. The Lords' Secondary Legislation Scrutiny Committee has criticised this move, saying the proposed changes would, quote, lower the threshold for serious disruption. Continuing, the same changes were rejected by the House of Lords when put forward as amendments, and the Home Office has not provided any new arguments as to why they should now be approved. While Number 10 feels like it has the public's backing to overrule the unelected House, many in the Lords disagree. The government wants to make changes to specifically note hindrance to the making of a journey as an example of disruption. It believes that the current lack of examples of disruption in the Act leaves police in an ambiguous position, often standing uselessly as protesters block cars, vans, and even ambulances. The changes would allow police to count the snowball effect of repeated protests as more serious, enabling faster police action. But there are those who believe that the Act, even in its original form, goes too far, and that disruptive protest is a right, even if it disrupts people's business and blocks highways.
Of course, we recognise that protests can often be very inconvenient and highly disruptive, but under international law, it's important to remember that those rights can only be restricted in very limited circumstances to prevent things like serious harm from taking place.
Yet the frustrations of many in the public and in Parliament are clear.
Does the Prime Minister agree with us? The moment those activists stand on the road, they should be immediately turfed off the road, like there are in many other countries.
The government has this week confirmed it will press ahead with its changes in the face of opposition from the House of Lords and some civil liberties groups. One thing is for certain, passions are high, and this is a debate that is not going away. Tom Harwood, GB News.
Lots of you getting in touch on Westminster. We've been talking about it this morning. It's after Geraint Davies, the Labour MP. He's been suspended from the party. Allegations of unwanted sexual behaviour, verbal and physical, against 5 women. Lots of you getting in touch on that story this morning.
Yeah, and Mel, I think, is justifiably outraged, and I cannot believe that there is a list of pests in Westminster, even with criminal offences proven, and yet they are still employed there. Fair point.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if those offences have always been proven, but there is a list of people who are known for this sort of behaviour that haven't yet been proven of anything criminal. Billy says, good morning, Ellie and Martin. If this list is being given out to people in Westminster, then it needs bringing to a head. They should lose their job if it's the only way to stop this, and that bar needs to be regulated. Their drink consumption needs to be regulated. Brilliant point.
Please.
Keep it coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us, because Manchester City face Manchester United in the FA Cup final later. We'll be bringing you the latest. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest forecast. I'm Mark Wilson. And after a fine, dry, settled week of weather across the country, it's more of the same through this weekend. Staying settled, lots of sunshine to come, but at times there will be some low clouds towards the east. Why is it so settled at the moment? It's all thanks to this area of high pressure. It really hasn't moved very far at all through the week, and it's going to stay through this coming weekend. So that's what's bringing all the dry weather, but also some cloud towards the east, which I'll just talk about a bit later on. So here's the picture for the first thing on Saturday morning. A fine start to the day for the vast majority. Lots of sunshine. Any cloud will tend to lift and break through the morning, but just a couple of exceptions to the rule. Across the very far north of Scotland here, there'll be thicker cloud, even the odd spot of rain possible, and slightly patchier cloud at times across some southeastern parts. But as I said, for the vast majority, a fine day to come. And in that sunshine, feeling warm as well. Afternoon highs of 21 to 23 degrees for many central and western parts, so warmer than on Friday. Temperatures still a bit cooler though towards that North Sea coast. Now through the rest of Saturday into the evening and overnight, it's more of the same. It stays dry across the board. Lengthy clear skies, one or two mist and fog patches, but through the night we'll start to see some lower clouds spreading in across eastern Scotland into eastern and central parts of England as well as that cloud moves westwards through the night. Here it won't be quite so cool, but further towards the west, another chilly night to come. Temperatures widely falling into single figures, colder than that in some rural spots. So we get off to a bit of an east-west start to the day on Sunday morning. Quite cloudy across some central and eastern parts, sunnier from the word go across the west. But through the day, much of that cloud will lift and break. So once again, by the time we get through to the late morning, early afternoon, another fine picture across the board. Lots of sunshine to come. Just a bit more cloud across the very far north with the odd spot of rain across Orkney and Shetland, and more cloud down that North Sea coast. But again, in that sunshine, another warm day to come, 21 to 23 degrees. And it stays fine, dry and settled for most areas into the early part of next week. High pressure still dominating, so lots more sunshine to come. And in that sunshine, once again, it will be pleasantly warm with highs up to the low 20s. I'll see you soon.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 3rd of June. This is coming up in the news this morning.
Travelling by train, well, think again, because train services are to be crippled once again today as another strike hits the rail network. Tens of thousands of Mancunians will be travelling south to the FA Cup final, but fortunately for Manchester United, this joke one more time. Lots of their fans are already in London because they're Cockney Reds.
Now, a second complaint has been brought against Swansea MP Geraint Davies as he remains suspended from the Labour Party pending an investigation into sexual misconduct. Does Westminster have a sex pest problem?
And do you know what to put in your recycling bins? The government is set to launch a drive to stop people putting the wrong types of items in their recycling. Items like plastic bags and toothpaste tubes cannot be processed in recycling centres.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
It's been a dry week of weather across the UK through this week, but is the fine and sunny weather going to continue across the country through this weekend? Find out all the details with me here on GB News.
Top of the morning, I'm Martin Daubney.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. To our top story now, and the FA Cup final goes ahead today as 90,000 fans will be heading to Wembley Stadium.
But this weekend's rail strikes will have a major effect on Manchester United and City supporters travelling down from the north of England.
Our reporter Jack Carson joins us now from Warwick Service Station. Good morning to you, Jack. I'm glad the sun's out for you this morning, but there has been so much disruption, hasn't there, for these travelling fans on what is a huge day for them.
Yeah, of course, Saturday, this is the second day, of course, of that ASLEF train strike, the drivers' union, which means that fans are having to make alternative arrangements, but they're coping quite well, as it seems. We've got loads of coaches coming from each of the clubs, and of course, people taking their cars down as well. This is all kind of links in with this security operation that Man United fans and the coaches are being set to stop at a different service station to those Manchester City fans, just to make sure everyone keeps it nice and enjoyable and nice and family friendly. We're here at Warwick Services, where a good few of the coaches have now started stopping off for those, of course, important toilet and food breaks. We're here now with a couple of Man United fans as well. Guys, tell me a little about how long have you guys been Manchester United fans?
Well, pretty much all my life, to be honest, because I've supported them because of my brother, and yes, very happy, yeah.
Yeah, and yourself?
Yes, it's about 15, 20 years, all our lives. We have been United fans. We spotted season ticket holders. It's all good, yeah.
It's a big game today. A lot for stake. How do you feel the game going today?
You know, I'm very confident because I think that Manchester City may be focused on the Champions League, and it may be a good opportunity for us to get a result today. You know.
And yourself?
Yeah, it's very much the same. I think they will not be focused on the treble. I think they will be focusing on the Champions League. So I think we have a good chance.
And a prediction from you both?
2-1, yeah.
I think it would be very tight. I think a draw and then maybe penalties or extra time.
All right, there you go. You heard it here first from the Manchester United fans here at Warwick Services. Apologies for the language you might have heard in the background, but the atmosphere is amazing. There's a real buzz here on the M40.
Just for people who weren't tuned in earlier, there's some real Del Boy style entrepreneurs who are really seizing this opportunity to make a quick buck.
Yes, yeah, he's still there. He's selling bucket hats and scarves and flags, just trying to catch any Manchester United fans. He has, to be fair, from what I've seen, he's had quite a good bit of business as well. So a clever place to pitch up here at Warwick Services.
And I wonder, Jack, are people brassed off with the fact they've got to take a coach and go out their way to get around it, or is it becoming part of the fun of the fair? They're just soldiering on and they're getting into the zone now.
Yeah, I think in some ways a lot of these fans are enjoying the coach because, of course, they have that kind of team atmosphere. You know, they can start chanting on the coach, they can sing. It's a bit of a better atmosphere than maybe travelling down on a train. Of course, there's no lie, it has caused some disruption this morning, the fact that so many fans would have gone down on those trains early morning, but they're finding alternative ways around it. That's certainly to say that you know, there's plenty of people coming by car, plenty of people enjoying the coach. It's just nice, happy. I mean, a train strike isn't going to put this lot of fans off enjoying an FA Cup final. It's a great day out.
Yeah, thank you, Jack Carlson. I've got to say, Eddie, I've done quite a few coach away days in my time. One of the problems, of course, you need quite a few toilet breaks because somebody gets a big slab of beer in, and often you sort of don't really remember the match. Jack, what's the sense of who's going to win today? Obviously, United, they're not very well fancied. They're 6-1 outsiders. City going for the treble, but are United fans, they've got their tails in the air?
Oh, Manchester United fans know that they really want to win this. Of course, it would stop any chance of Manchester City getting that treble if they go and win the Champions League in a couple of weeks' time as well. Of course, Manchester United won the treble years and years ago, so if they can stop their biggest rivals doing that, then that'll make this lot very, very happy indeed. And of course, they've already won the League Cup this season, so to do a domestic double would be a very, very successful season for Ten Hag at Manchester United. So, although the odds might be against them, everyone loves an underdog, if you can call Manchester United underdogs today. But it's an FA Cup final which you can never predict the result of, and it's a derby which makes this even more unpredictable.
Jack Carlson, you're doing a stellar job there at Warwick Service Station. Thank you so much. Really good to see how busy it is and what good spirits the fans are in as well. So thank you so much, Jack, for bringing that to us. It does look like a really good atmosphere down there. People seem in good spirits.
Yeah, and it's great to see that, you know, people aren't kind of grumbling about the travel. They're just working their way around it. And I think it's going to make people think, well, do we need the trains anymore? And football fans just kind of soldiering on, and I think we've got a great day. Let's not forget, of course, there's also the Scottish Cup final north of the border, not just Wembley today. Yeah, lots of football taking place today, but I do feel really bad for people that have had to go in their cars. I mean, the FA have put on 60 coaches for each team today, so really made that effort to get fans down to London. But if you've had to get in the car, that additional cost on top of your ticket, it's huge, and we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. It's very difficult for people. And if anybody's listening on the radio on the way down there, don't forget you've got to pay Sadiq Khan's ULEZ charge, £12.50. Don't forget to pay it, or you get a £60 fine. Yeah, well, there you go, don't forget. Lots of you getting in touch on the train strikes. Nigel says, well, since it's become totally unreliable, I've changed the way I conduct my life. And to be honest, if the railways didn't exist, it wouldn't bother me anymore. And we were having this conversation with our newspaper reviewers a little bit earlier on, and it's where the train strikes have been going on for almost a year now. We're coming up to that year anniversary. Does it just mean that they've bitten their nose off to spite their face, if you like, and the public have now decided we don't need the trains, we'll make it work another way? And Ben's having another pop on that same point. In my opinion, these railway strikers are totally selfish, considering the financial support they received during the furlough scheme of the COVID pandemic. So they've been taking taxpayers' money hand over fist to stay open. In fact, I think as much as a third of all profits coming out of the rail is actually public money. So they're taking public money and they're not there when the public need them the most on big days like today, Ellie. Well, Aidan McGee, our sports correspondent, is joining us in the studio now. Good morning to you, Aidan. This is a huge day, isn't it, at Wembley for Manchester United and Manchester City?
Without doubt, first time we've seen an all-Manchester FA Cup final. We saw a semi-final back in 2011, which Manchester City won. I was at that game, had the privilege of being there, so I know what a big Manchester occasion feels like at Wembley. Fast forward 12 years, things are much different. United were the favourites that day. Not so anymore. City have really accomplished and have become a very accomplished side, and they're on the verge of history here, creating a treble. United, the only previous British team to have done the treble of FA Cup, Premier League title and Champions League. United go into this game protecting their legacy, their history today, and that's why a team talk isn't really necessary. I think Manchester City rather are a little bit susceptible when they played United last time. They were certainly second best at Old Trafford. Back earlier in the season, it was 2-1 that finished that day. They're playing their second-choice goalkeeper, Stefan Ortega, because he plays the cup games, and Pep Guardiola has decided to keep faith with him. I think that's a weakness that potentially United can exploit. But yeah, it's constantly. Arsenal's big thing is that we're the Invincibles in 2004. Yeah. Man United's big thing is that we've done the treble. They would not like. This is not an ordinary rival. This is not Leeds United outside the top six. This is not an ordinary top six rival like an Arsenal or a Chelsea. They could lose that distinction today to their cross-city rivals, Manchester City, who I would argue are their biggest rivals after Liverpool. OK, and also to keep our loyal viewers north of the border happy, there is another football match today, of course, the Scottish Cup final at Hampden Park. Another treble at stake, yeah, exactly. Celtic won 2 trophies last season, so they could go for a triple this time. Ange Postecoglou in charge. They're playing against Inverness Caledonian Thistle. It's 5:30 kick-off. Celtic expected to win. They'd be overwhelming favourites. The subplot, of course, is that Ange Postecoglou, who's done a fantastic job since he went into Parkhead. He came from the J-League over in Japan. Fairly unheralded, 57 years old, big personality, sorted Celtic out, pulled them up by the bootstraps when Neil Lennon departed back in 2021, having lost the opportunity to win 10 league titles in a row. It's been suggested today strongly in the media that Tottenham are going to make an approach. I can't remember the last time a top six club in this country approached an old firm manager. I think you might have to go back to when Liverpool took Graham Souness from Rangers back in 1991. So huge thing for them today. It'd be nice to go out for a win for them. Postecoglou said, it's not even registering on my radar, Tottenham's interest, but that'd be a big thing afterwards if Tottenham can make that approach and make him their manager. Bittersweet day then for Celtic fans, because if they win and then they get their gaffer stolen. Yeah, look, it's happened before. I mean, Brendan Rodgers was going great guns there back in 2019 when Leicester took him. It was a bit galling for them because, I remember a banner at Celtic saying you could have had, I can't remember the name of the actual wording, but they said you've settled for mediocrity going to a club outside the top six. This would be different. They're losing the manager to the top six side. It's different. Celtic will be rueful in a way because they would believe that they've won more in their history than Tottenham ever have. They've got a bigger fan base, but they don't play in a league that guarantees you a certain amount of money from the Premier League, as in the Sky rights. So they can't compete at the level they would expect to compete for a club of their size because of the economic implications. Action-packed day of sport, 3 o'clock FA Cup, 5:30 Scottish Cup, but the start, of course, of a juicy day sport, of course, is the Epsom Derby. We talk about the protests, I think, enough now. Yeah. Should we just deal away with it? Yeah, let's talk about the GGs. Could this be the ultimate Hollywood ending for a 29 dream career for Frankie Dettori's last ever race at the Derby? His first ever race was at Epsom. Could this be the happy ending? It would be wonderful if we were able to talk about that in terms of, the sporting achievement, the merit, rather than the protests, as we mentioned earlier on. He's 52 years old. He announced his retirement earlier in the year. It's been a kind of farewell tour. He's on a favourite horse today, Arrest, owned by, trained by John and Thady Gosden. 5-1 shot at the moment. Depends which bookies you get it from. I think you said 4.3 earlier on, didn't you? You could get on Arrest winning this afternoon. It's 1:30 as well. It's been brought forward just to accommodate the FA Cup final, which is happening at 3 o'clock. But don't rule out other horses as well. We mentioned Leicester City earlier on, didn't we? Their owners have got a horse called the Foxes at 8-1. Given they were relegated last Sunday, it'd be nice for them to come back and have a bit of success in a different sport, wouldn't it? And then Passenger as well, also available at 5-1. Depends which bookies you go with, but yeah, it'd be nice to move things on from the protest, wouldn't it? Superb, an action-packed day, and thanks for that full update, Aidan McGee. Nice to see you this morning. All the best. Yes.
Now, as we were saying, the Epsom Derby kicks off today, but it's not without any controversy, as the animal rights group Animal Rising plan to disrupt today's race.
Yeah, and it comes after the Jockey Club were granted a High Court injunction in a bid to prevent protesters from disrupting the races today.
Well, we're joined now by our reporter, Paul Hawkins, who is there for us. Good morning to you, Paul. What are we expecting today?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it, Ellie? What are we expecting today? We know that there's normally a lot of racing. It's Derby Day, so you've got the Derby, which, as Aidan was alluding to, starts at 1:30, which is a little bit earlier. The question is, that disruption that you're talking about from Animal Rising, they have said that they are going to disrupt or cancel the race. So they're not afraid of breaking the law. The authorities here, the Jockey Club, they're the people that own the racecourse. They've already tried to close off all the legal avenues. They've got that High Court injunction. They've invested £150,000 in enhanced security here. They've been liaising with Surrey Police all week. We had day one of the Epsom Festival yesterday, which passed off without a hitch. But you would have thought if you're going to publicise your campaign and what you want to protest about, then you're going to pick the big day, the showpiece, the Derby, aren't you? So we have heard from one animal rising protester who said that they don't want to put any of the people who are here, the jockeys, the horses, members of the public, or indeed the protesters themselves, at risk. So the implication would seem to be that they're not going to try and disrupt a live race while it's happening. The smart money would therefore be on trying to disrupt the racecourse before or after the race, probably before the Derby, which is the second race of the day's schedule. But there are more stewards here. We were walking around here yesterday. You could see steward security police eyeballing everyone, really heavily surveilling everyone, looking out for anyone who might try something in the crowd. There's going to be even more of that today. They are ready for it. They're wary but prepared. That's what Nevin Truesdale, the chief executive of the Jockey Club, has said, and they've put in place all the measures they can. But it's difficult because, as we said yesterday, Epsom Racecourse is a very open racecourse. There are lots of public rights of way around and through the course. It's not like Aintree where they hold the Grand National. So trying to prevent people getting on the track is difficult, and that's why they've got these extra measures in place to try and mitigate any delay to the race that there may be. Indeed, the reason for scheduling the race early is not just because of the FA Cup final, but because there could be a delay to it. So we are expecting some sort of disruption later today. But in terms of the racing itself, as Aidan said, it's all about Frankie Dettori, his farewell season, and ironically he's riding a horse called Arrest.
OK, Paul, lots to talk about the protests, of course, but we do have a big race on today. That's obviously what today is about. Frankie Dettori, 29-year career, coming to perhaps a dramatic Hollywood ending today. He's on a horse much fancied, Arrest, at 4.3 to 1. What's the feeling within Epsom at the ground about Dettori's chances? Are they looking forward to this dramatic end to a fantastic career?
Yeah, look, for people like me, I'll be honest, I don't know anything about horses or horse racing. I don't even gamble myself. But I know who Frankie Dettori is, and that's the thing about people like Frankie Dettori. He's kind of like the Anthony Joshua of boxing. He transcends the sport. You've heard of him even if you know nothing about horse racing. And so you know he's had a long career, and certainly everyone within the world of horse racing, and people who are just here as punters who just want to come and spend a day at the Derby, people who know nothing about horse racing, they want to see this farewell to what is arguably one of horse racing's most flamboyant riders. So it will be fantastic if he wins. He is the favourite, but as we know in horse racing, anything can happen. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting day, and the Derby gets underway at 1:30. We've already had the rehearsal here for the fireworks and the national anthem, so certainly the singer of the national anthem in very good voice, as we found out early this morning, and we're looking forward to what should be a fantastic day of racing once the sun comes out.
Thank you, Paul Hawkins. Full of beans and looking very dapper, I have to say, on race day. Thanks for that full update from Epsom. Thank you.
You're enjoying all the men's fashion today, aren't you?
I am. I just think he's well turned out. He's
Yeah.
well attired for a fantastic day out of the races. And it's just good to see a nice, smart gentleman.
Well, let's hope the sun comes out as well for everybody that's going to Epsom Derby today. And you can also see behind Paul the security, wasn't there? There was heavy security. You could see them on the track there, obviously trying to keep an eye on the perimeter of that racetrack. It's going to be very, very difficult to be across everything when we've got this protest a little bit later.
That's right, because the Jockey Club they've put on a designated protest area. Well, the protesters don't tend to follow where they're told to go. And if you know the course, I've been there a bunch of times, it's a massive perimeter. It's going to be very, very hard to stop people getting in the whole width around it. They've already put, I think, an extra £150,000 into security. I really hope we're not talking about this kind of nonsense tomorrow. I hope we're talking about a fantastic race and not these miscreants once again setting out to spoil another fantastic sporting event.
Well, let's hope so, and let's hope as well that nobody comes to any harm, or indeed that no animals come to any harm today, because we did have an Animal Rising spokesperson in with us yesterday who, although she said she'd be sticking to the plan, which is that designated area to protest, she is aware that people will be using their bodies in order to use disruption, and that makes me feel nervous when you hear that.
And they use that specific phrase, putting their lives on the the line. Well, that means one thing, doesn't it? It means throwing yourself out there. I really hope that doesn't happen, because one of them is going to get severely hurt or worse. And what about the horses? What about the riders? Can we just put this to one side and just let sport crack on and carry on? It was almost decimated during lockdowns. Now the race must go on.
Yeah, well, let us know what you think about that story, because I'm sure lots of you will have an opinion at home. gbviews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us. Lots more to come, including, are you thinking about retiring anytime soon? Well, you might have to think again. Some of us may need to work until we're 95. This is Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. It's 9:23. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with me, Martin and Ellie. And remember to get in touch with us all the usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, earlier, just before that break, we were talking about protesters that could be appearing at the Epsom Derby today. Animal Rising are going to be there. They have warned they're going to use their bodies to cause disruption. Aren't they?
It's a huge talking point because, of course, we're seeing Just Stop Oil, we're seeing these protesters. So is it time the government and the police took a firmer hand? Well, that's the debate next, because the government has come under pressure from all sides over its anti-protest laws. Some say they are too draconian, whilst others argue they have not given the police enough direction to stop disruption.
Well, now the government is seeking to toughen them up. Our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, has the latest.
Oh, my... Oh. This is absolute mayhem. Absolute mayhem. People are so close to being run over. This is incredibly dangerous. There is no police presence at the moment.
Blocking roads, gluing themselves to the floor, and throwing paint on historic buildings and works of art. Extreme protest groups like Just Stop Oil have been increasingly disruptive in their methods, highlighting their cause through deliberate causation of chaos. And politicians have been attempting to crack down on these groups for some time.
No, you can't just start a riot or glue yourself to the roads and get away with it.
The government's Public Order Act tried to give the police new powers to immediately crack down on protests that cause, quote, serious disruption to the life of a community. But the government's plans were watered down by the House of Lords. Now the government wants to overrule the Lords using a nifty mechanism sometimes referred to as Henry VIII powers that can change law without the consent of Parliament. The Lords' Secondary Legislation Scrutiny Committee has criticised this move, saying the proposed changes would, quote, lower the threshold for serious disruption. Continuing, the same changes were rejected by the House of Lords when put forward as amendments, and the Home Office has not provided any new arguments as to why they should now be approved. While Number 10 feels like it has the public's backing to overrule the unelected House, many in the Lords disagree. The government wants to make changes to specifically note hindrance to the making of a journey as an example of disruption. It believes that the current lack of examples of disruption in the Act leaves police in an ambiguous position, often standing uselessly as protesters block cars, vans, and even ambulances. The changes would allow police to count the snowball effect of repeated protests as more serious, enabling faster police action. But there are those who believe that the Act, even in its original form, goes too far, and that disruptive protest is a right, even if it disrupts people's business and blocks highways.
Of course, we recognise that protests can often be very inconvenient and highly disruptive, but under international law, it's important to remember that those rights can only be restricted in very limited circumstances to prevent things like serious harm from taking place.
Yet the frustrations of many in the public and in Parliament are clear.
Does the Prime Minister agree with us? The moment those activists stand on the road, they should be immediately turfed off the road, like there are in many other countries.
The government has this week confirmed it will press ahead with its changes in the face of opposition from the House of Lords and some civil liberties groups. One thing is for certain, passions are high, and this is a debate that is not going away. Tom Harwood, GB News.
You know, Eddie, it's a really big talking point in this, because on the one hand, you know, I absolutely and fundamentally defend people's right to protest. However, we have to accept that now the protesters have the power. You know, we've seen time and time again Just Stop Oil on the M25, doing the slow walk in front of vehicles, working-class drivers. They're the ones getting arrested when they're stepping in and trying to move them out of the way. The public doing the police's job. And I wonder, actually, if tinkering with the law isn't the point. The point is, do the police actually want to police anymore, or are they just soft-soaping the protesters? It's a cup of tea and sympathy. Whereas what the punters want to see, I think, is get out the blooming road, let me go about my business, let me earn a pound note. There's a cost of living crisis. This isn't about you. Take your protests out of the way and let me get to my business.
I think for a lot of people as well, it's the danger element. It's you're more than entitled to protest. It's when you put my life or anybody else's life, your own life, at risk in order to do so. That's when it crosses a line for a lot of people. But do get in touch with what you think, your views on that. gbviews@gbnews.com. I'm just going to share Graham's view. He's been in touch. This is on the Westminster scandal that we've been discussing this morning. It's after Geraint Davies, who is a Labour politician, an MP. he's been suspended from the party. 2 formal complaints have now been made about him, allegations of unwanted sexual attention, both physical and verbal, against 5 women, the youngest being just 19 years old. And there are now Labour MPs, one of them being Charlotte Nichols, speaking out, essentially saying that when she became an MP in 2019, she was handed a physical list of names, 30 of them, she said.
It's outrageous.
And she was told, don't get in a lift with these people, don't accept drinks from these people, don't be in a one-on-one situation with these people. It shocked a lot of you. Mel couldn't believe that there was a list. Billy said, I can't believe that there is this list of MPs being given to new employees. It needs bringing to a head. Graham says, hi, Ellie and Martin, what I don't understand is when these politicians are exposed for inappropriate behaviour, they all say that they knew about it for ages. These are the people that are running the country, but all sides seem to be protecting themselves. If there are rumours like this, why aren't they investigated? If there were stories where I work, it would at least be looked into. They just seem to let it go.
Yeah, and it's, of course, not just politics. We've seen with show business, with the Schofield scandal this week, there seems to be this imbalance of power.
It is power, though, isn't it?
It's kind of successful, tends to be men who've been around. Young people come into the industry who want to get that foot up on the career ladder, and where there's that imbalance, there will be people who take advantage. But a lot of people today, Ellie, and you and I both agree, how can these lists be bandied about and nothing's done about it? It just seems to me incredulous.
It does seem like it is so widely known, but currently so little is done about it. But it must be said, and we both agree on that as well, Labour have acted very quickly with this Geraint Davies situation, the allegations surrounding him. He has been suspended from the Labour Party, and that did, to be fair to them, happen very, very quickly, didn't it? Yeah. But to stay with us, lots more to come, including Showbiz with Stephanie Tetchy. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
Now, do you ever think about retirement and what age you'd want to give up work?
When would you like to give up work?
Well, it's a funny old thing because my dad's 86 and he's still 86 this year and he still works. He loves it. He reckons if he stops working, he'll drop dead. But I'm approaching my middle ages now and I would like to, I think, knock it on the head a bit before that.
OK,
certainly.
when are you thinking then?
In a few years, soon.
Oh. OK.
Yeah, because a lot of people are doing that now, especially during the pandemic. I think we also say, well, is there a point beyond this hamster wheel all the time? A lot of people are selling up, they're getting out of cities, they're moving away, they're downsizing, they're mortgage-free. Sounds pretty tempting.
Yeah, feeling like there's more to life than work.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about this because new research shows 8 in 10 employees are concerned about when they're due to retire because of the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, and financial pressures are also causing employees to stop paying into their work pensions.
Well, we can speak now to the Director of Wealth at Work, Jonathan Watts-Ley. Good morning to you, Jonathan. Very, very good to have you with us. And I mean, the reality is people will be nervous, won't they? Because in order to retire, you need to be very financially secure.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's one of the issues is that the research highlights that really across the age ranges, people are concerned about when they will be able to retire. And certainly those that are nearer what may have been their aspirational retirement are realising that maybe they won't be able to do that now. And that's for a number of reasons, really. Clearly, the cost of living crisis is one of them, and they feel as though they might need to carry on working because their pension pot isn't going to last as long as they thought it would.
I think another part of the problem here, though, Jonathan, is that the pension age seems to be getting moved further and further north all the time. I feel sometimes by the time I get to my retirement age, then the pension age is going to be 95 anyway.
Well, that's right. And of course, a lot of people, even though they know that the state pension may be actually quite a cornerstone in terms of the income that they will need in retirement, a lot of people actually want to retire before their state pension age. So again, I think this is one of the impacts that it's having is that some people are saying, well, have I got enough of my private pension to see me through before I get to my state pension? And I think that's one of the crunch areas right now.
Of course, we're all living longer, aren't we? I mean, we were just talking just before we spoke to you, we were chatting about it in the break. We were saying traditionally you'd think about retiring at 60. Martin's still hoping to do so. But if you live until your mid-90s, 100 years old, which isn't actually that rare these days, I mean, that could be 40 years that you have to live off this lump sum.
Yeah, and previous research has shown that people completely underestimate how long they're likely to live. So, I mean, on one hand, that's great news. They're going to live longer than they think. But on the other hand, of course, they need to have the finances to see them through. And of course, one of the problems with retirement is you don't quite know how much money you're going to need over such a long period of time. So, for example, if you think about as people get older and they start getting various ailments, and they might need to spend more money on health or getting people coming in to help them in the home. So often you find that people retire, they spend proportionately a bit more money because they want to go on holiday, then they slow down, they spend less money, but then their costs start to kick up a little bit again as they get older. But of course, it's very hard to predict what that kick up is going to be because it's very personalised. It depends on health and various other factors.
Do you think that there's been a bit of government pressure recently to try and court older people back into the workplace? So people with lots of skills, lots of life experience, particularly things like teaching, nursing. Is that going to become, do you think, increasingly necessary to address shortages? For example, why are we importing so much labour from overseas, particularly in areas like teaching and nursing, when we have a huge amount of wealth, of knowledge, a font of knowledge of people who are retired? Getting them back into the workplace, A, it's good for the economy, B, it keeps immigration down, if you like, and most of all, it tops up the ability to not rely just on your pension. But do people want to do that, or are people just happily just retiring?
Well, I think we've seen it, and I think you mentioned it at the start of this piece, is that when COVID hit, there were a lot of people that actually may be facing redundancy, and because they were at an age of, let's say, late 50s, early 60s, where they thought, well, actually, I will treat this as retirement. I wasn't planning to retire quite this early, but the situation I'm now in, I will retire. So there was a good number of people that left the workforce. Now, I suspect, and the data is still coming through on this, so we'll have to see how it all pans out. But I suspect a lot of those people who retired earlier than perhaps they initially wanted to now realise that, again, with the cost of living, their pension simply isn't going to last all those years that as you point out, they're likely to live. So I actually think there will be this natural movement back into the workplace of some of those workers. Now, whether they will go back to the job that they had before, whether they will go back to full-time jobs, I think is yet to be seen in the data. But I think there will be a movement back where people say, I do need to have additional income to supplement my pension.
Jonathan, for people who are watching and listening this morning and are considering retirement, what would your advice to them be? What sorts of things do they need to be considering?
So I think the first thing is to make sure that they understand what all their pensions are worth. On average, the average person apparently has about 11 jobs during their working lives. So potentially somebody could have 11 pensions. Some may have even more. So I think the first thing to do is know where your pensions are and know what your pensions are worth, because until you know that, it's very hard to calculate anything in terms of can you afford to retire. I think the other thing to do is get your state pension forecast as well. So you can go onto the government website, put in your national insurance number, and basically get your forecast. Because let's not forget, state pension for a lot of people will actually be the bulk of their retirement income. So it's really important to know what that number will be. And for those who have other types of savings and investments, so for example ISAs, again, understand what those are worth, because of course for a lot of people now, pulling all those savings together, a combination of pensions and other savings, that can all form part of what may be a retirement income for you. So I would suggest that is the most important thing to do. The second most important thing to do is then probably to work out what you think you need in retirement. Now, this is going to be different for different people. Some people might be looking forward to a very kind of modest retirement where they don't anticipate spending lots of money. Other people may decide that they want to travel the world. So clearly, depending on what your ambition is for retirement, your income needs are going to be different. And then you can start doing this match about will the income that I can realistically generate from my pensions match actually my expenditure and give me an income for as you say, it might be 25, 30 years into the future. I think for a lot of people, they're going to need to get help as well. So they should be talking to their employer, because a lot of employers do support people as they come up to retirement and help them understand options. There's also websites that they can go to. So there's the moneyhelper.org.uk website, which is a government-run website, but it gives some information around, actually cost of living, but also through to pensions.
I've got a question for you, Jonathan. Am I correct in assuming, is it July the 31st as a cut-off point this year where you're allowed to make voluntary national insurance contributions for historical time you may have missed. For example, if you're self-employed or if you missed parts like I did for travelling, you have the ability to voluntarily pay that in now so you get a full state pension when you retire. Is it worth doing that? No, so for every pound you put in, do you get your money back? Or because people are pretty tight with money at the moment because of the cost of living crisis, is it wiser to hold on to the money, or should we make sure that we're all fully up to date on contributions for NI historically?
Yeah, so this deadline is just the number of years that you can go back. So you will still be able to do it after July, but you won't be able to count as many years. So it's not an absolute deadline in that you won't be able to do it in the future. But in terms of is it worthwhile doing, then the key thing that you need to think about is where is that money coming from? So if you're going to go and take a loan out in order to pay in more contributions, that may not be considered a particularly good idea. I think the other thing that you need to think about is actually whether having that higher income, if you're already on a low income, then it may impact other benefits that you will get when you get to retirement age. Now that's often a very difficult thing to work out, because of course you can take it based on what the situation is today, but if your retirement is 5, 10, 15 years away, then it's very hard to know what benefits will be available and what the criteria will be for those benefits. So at face value, it is a good thing to do, so people should definitely look into it, but it won't be the right thing for everyone.
Okay, Jonathan Watsley, really, really good to speak to you this morning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was actually fishing for a bit of personal advice there.
Yeah.
I know he's not meant to do that, but I've basically got this historic bill. Should I pay into it or not? I think he's answered the question. I should. I've got to take a bit of a hit in the current day because I went travelling. I was self-employed for a bunch of years. A lot of people do that, of course. There's no such thing as a job for life now. But you have the ability to top up those previous years. And I think he just said you should get your act together and do so.
Yeah. Lots of you getting in touch this morning on the rail strikes, obviously the chaos it means for the FA Cup final at Wembley today. We were talking to Jack Carson, our reporter, earlier. He was with some of the fans. We were remarking that it looked really fun there. Andy says, well, it may look happy and fun now. Wait until the booze-induced violence starts.
That's a nice optimistic outlook for the day there. Joseph is saying, unfortunately, with the unions trying to bring the government down, we should close down the trains and see how they like it. Joseph, fighting talk now.
Yeah, Paddy says, put all the rail tracks up, tarmac over the rail routes and then run hydrogen-powered coaches and HGVs on them. It's cleaner, it's greener, it's cheaper, and it couldn't be less efficient than trains.
Yeah, that might be a bit of a tall order before the Cup final.
Yes.
That's quite a radical overhaul. Alan, final point on the train strikes. Why won't these so-called union barons put the whole vote to its members? Well, I think they have done, haven't they? They just want to cause maximum disruption to the general public. Of course, they are still drawing their huge salaries. So I'm taking Alan, you're no fan of people like Nick Lynch.
And no, I don't think they've put the most recent offer to their members yet because they really aren't happy with the conditions. I think we were speaking to Mick Lynch a few weeks ago. He said it wasn't even good enough to pass on to the members. We'll do keep your views coming in. We do love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK, moving to our next story now. Accidental drownings on Britain's waterways have been in the news a lot lately, and that is backed up by the figures, with 597 dying last year.
Well, it follows on from this week's incident in Bournemouth, in which a 12-year-old girl from Buckinghamshire and a 17-year-old boy from Southampton died after getting into trouble in the water.
But most incidents, some 60% in fact, happen on inland waters such as rivers, canals, reservoirs and lakes. We asked the charity director of the Royal Life Saving Society UK, Lee Hurd, why so many people are dying in UK waters.
Few things to note really. Around 50% of the drownings happen in the summer months, so we know there's a direct correlation between the weather starting to warm up and people getting into trouble in the water. And I noted you made the comment about majority of drownings happening inland. Hardly any drownings happen in swimming pools, and it's reduced to the coast, and we know the reason for this is that there's professional supervision in those areas. Unfortunately, inland waterways are so accessible, they're around areas of high population. There's no supervision, so we've got people going there to enjoy the water, to cool off. And there's no backstop so that if they do get into trouble, there's no one there to rescue them. And there's also this disconnect between the majority of children, especially in England, learning to swim in a warm, heated swimming pool, and them then having the perception that they can go to a cold, open body of water and those skills translate, and they simply don't. Learning to swim in a warm, heated swimming pool with a lifeguard on the side doesn't translate into a cold, deep, open water lake with currents in it.
And also, of course, Lee, there's this huge disconnect between a heat wave temperature and then the temperature of the water often could be like 4 degrees, like as cold as a fridge. It takes a long time for bodies of water to heat up, doesn't it? So even though it feels like a scorcher above water, as it were, in the water, it's a very different picture.
Yeah, it is. And again, we're used to swimming in swimming pool temperature. Open water swimming has become very popular in the UK, and that's amazing. But people that open water swim do take time to get their body used to the cold water. They go in slowly and they train and train and train so that they can then have the ability to swim. The majority of young people, especially boys that are getting into trouble, don't have that training. So they're jumping in the water when the water is incredibly cold. And what it does is send their body into cold water shock, which means it gets a physiological response to cold water, which makes them hyperventilate. And even the strongest swimmers struggle to survive in that water. And then even if they're not affected by cold water shock, within 10-15 minutes their muscles will start to wean, and then that makes it really difficult to swim. So again, we see groups of young lads especially trying to swim large distances in cold water, and they're just not able to get themselves back because they go into what we call swim failure.
I swim in rivers with my kids. My boy's 14, my daughter's 9, but I get them a cheap wetsuit. You can get a cheap wetsuit from cheap supermarkets now, even like 20 quid, and it keeps them warm and it keeps them buoyant. So there are simple tips like that parents particularly can encourage their children to do, aren't there?
Yeah, wetsuits certainly help keep people warmer and keep the cold temperature away. What we would say to anybody is that if you are going to go into cold open water, we would prefer you to do it where there's professional lifeguards there, because if you do get into trouble, there's someone there to save you. But if people are going to enter the water, there's a few simple things that they can remember. Firstly, make sure there is supervision on the side. So if you are going to enter the water, make sure there's someone there watching you so that if you do get into trouble, they can call the emergency services immediately on 999 and get help to you. And if you see someone in the water or you feel overwhelmed yourself, our simple message is to stay calm, lie on your back, float on your back, keep your airway clear. And what that does is give you vital minutes for someone to come and help you raise the alarm, get the emergency services there and get you out safely.
Now, Caroline Flack's mum says ITV has learnt nothing from the death of her daughter.
Yes, Christine Flack gave an interview to BBC's Newsnight and says ITV treats presenters like commodities. She also said she's worried for Philip Schofield.
And Showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecchi joins us now to go through this. Steph, interesting development this, because when Philip Schofield initially mentioned Caroline Flack in his BBC interview, there's quite a backlash to it, but it seems that Caroline's mother, Christina, stepped in and he's been vindicated in his points somewhat.
It feels quite poignant, Christine Flack coming out and speaking about this, because I recall Caroline Flack's last Instagram post before she ended her life. It was a meme saying that if you can be anything in this world, be kind. And that kind of brought in a whole nationwide introspection into how the media handles these kind of scandals, and knowing that behind these scandals and these headlines, there is a person who has to deal with it behind closed doors. And of course, Christine Flack has voiced her concern for Philip Schofield, feeling about his mental health, because he has said this week he has felt like ending his life. And we have a clip from Christine.
It worries me because it's relentless on him. I feel, I do feel worried for him. He knew Caroline, and I must say when she died, he was very upset. And I think he's now realising even more what she went through. No, they haven't learnt anything. They haven't. They treat them as commodities. And I know it's a lovely job and I know they earn money, but also the television stations that earn money from them. But they're not commodities, they're people and they're employed. And if my employee didn't take care of me, there'd be all hell to pay.
ITV, of course, have had to respond to this, and they've said the relationships we have with those we work with are based on trust. Philip made assurances to us and his agency, which he now acknowledges were untrue, and we feel badly let down. As a producer and broadcaster, ITV takes its responsibilities around duty of care seriously and has robust and well-established processes in place to support the mental and physical health of employees and all those we work with.
Certainly a really challenging time for ITV. They, of course, are going to face questioning from MPs, and all eyes are on Monday morning, where Holly Willoughby will be back on the sofa.
The big question of the week is, will Holly return? Should she return? And, of course, now she is going to return on Monday, and she'll have a new co-host, which will be Josie Gibson. I can imagine a lot of viewers are going to be tuned in to see what Holly has to say. She's kept a dignified silence against Philip Schofield, who's reached out to her by text. But when you're on camera, you're going to have to address the issue.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what she has to say, and indeed very interesting to see what happens with ITV execs in front of MPs as well. Stephanie, thank you so much for your company this morning. And thank you very much for your company as well with all of the stories that we've been talking about today. We've really, really appreciated your company. That's it from us, but we can stay tuned with Esther and Phil, who are going to be here with the Saturday morning. Sure, it's going to be an absolutely packed show with them. But Martin, it's been great working with you. We're back together on Friday, aren't we?
I'm in tomorrow.
You're in tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in tomorrow as well. And Friday next week as well. Lots to look forward to. Esther and Phil up next.
Hello and welcome to your latest forecast. I'm Mark Wilson. And after a fine, dry, settled week of weather across the country, it's more of the same through this weekend. Staying settled, lots of sunshine to come, but at times there will be some low clouds towards the east. Why is it so settled at the moment? It's all thanks to this area of high pressure. It really hasn't moved very far at all through the week, and it's going to stay through this coming weekend. So that's what's bringing all the dry weather, but also some cloud towards the east, which I'll just talk about a bit later on. So here's the picture for the first thing on Saturday morning. A fine start to the day for the vast majority. Lots of sunshine. Any cloud will tend to lift and break through the morning, but just a couple of exceptions to the rule across the very